Chapter 328. Obviously, Vagabond Qing Yi had reached an agreement with the leaders of the local clans in Flying Snow City. Right after Wu Qi settled Yan Qijuan and his two companions in the best room in Snowcloud Courtyard, a group of cultivators with an air of arrogance that seemed to be unparalleled in the world broke into Snowcloud Courtyard. There were 4 Jin Dan cultivators, and 12 Xiantian cultivators. However, the leader of the group was a peak-stage Hotian cultivator, who looked to be about the same age as Wu Qi, about 17 or 18 years old. He was born with a handsome face, and had a rather romantic temperament. However, his face was pale, and his eyes were dark and bloodshot. Obviously, his vitality had been damaged by excessive wine and women. Vaguely, Wu Qi could feel that the energies in this man's body were fluctuating and messy. Unless he spent a lot of resources and used some spirit pills to strengthen his foundation, it would be impossible for him to break through the Xiantian realm. Su Tai was carefully serving the young man. When he saw Wu Qi walk out from the main room, he quickly came up to him and said, "Senior Immortal, this is Su Yi, the 9th young master of Su clan. You've heard it just now. A senior heaven immortal has given the order to interrogate all the people who come and go in Flying Snow City." Before Su Tai could finish his words, Su Yi had already waved his arm and shouted, "Enough! Why are you talking so much nonsense?" Striding before Wu Qi, Su Yi gave Wu Qi a disdainful glance, then cried out sternly, "What is your name? Where did you come to Shuiyuan planet? How long have you been here? What do you do? You look like a bandit to me. You are not a good guy. Somebody, capture this guy alive, throw him into the prison, and interrogate him." 4 Jin Dan human immortals tilted their heads up and stared coldly at Wu Qi, slowly approaching him step by step. One of them said coldly, "Junior, don't resist, or you'll have to suffer." Wu Qi shook his head and did not say a word. There were so many arrogant and ignorant people under the heaven. It was not worth it to be angry with them. Then, he heard Su Ye's sinister laugh and said, "That snow python inner core just now belongs to you, you thief." "No, I think that inner core must be stolen goods. I heard that a few days ago, the Mu clan's storehouse was robbed and a snow python's inner core was lost." "Su Tai, is there such a thing? The inner core that you took out just now, was it the one that the Mu family lost?" The Su family and the Mu family have been on good terms for generations. Now that they have been robbed, our Su family has the obligation to help them recover the stolen goods. Su Tai opened his mouth and his face turned red. He didn't dare to make a sound. He looked at Wu Qi and lowered his head again. Wu Qi couldn't help but feel sick in his heart. What's wrong with these cultivator clans? Feng clan and Yu clan of Dark Radiance planet were like that, and now, Su clan of Shuiyuan planet was also like that. Aren't their eyes a little too shallow? Can't they see anything good? And why were they all so despicable? How could they be so skilled in framing others and making others a scapegoat? Coldly staring at Su Yi, who was wearing an arrogant expression, Wu Qi quietly fished out a black medallion from under his sleeve. It was forged using 10,000 years old dark iron from the bottom of the ocean, shaped like a ghost or skeleton, and had 3 sharp horns growing out of its forehead. The medallion was shrouded in dark smoke, and faint miserable howls kept coming out from it. Right after he took out the medallion, the surrounding temperatures suddenly dropped. Su Yi, and Chi shuddered, and they were forced to take a few steps back by the threatening ghost aura and evil force emanating from the medallion. Grinning coldly, Wu Qi said in a ferocious voice, "I'm really a bandit. Of course, I have the aura of a bandit. Little Su, is that inner core really the one that was stolen from the Mu clan? Are you going to throw me into the prison and interrogate me with torture? Hee, do you know who I am? Do you know me? Do you know me? What's written on this medallion? Fuck you." Wu Qi thrust his leg out and gave Su Yi a powerful kick on his lower abdomen, who had his eyes wide open and his face turning green. The kick made him scream miserably as he was sent flying 80 feet away. Wu Qi had exerted all his strength in the kick. With just a flick, the kick shattered a clump of innate energy in Su Ye's dantian, opening up a crack in his dantian. At least 70% of his cultivation base was destroyed. Wu Qi snapped sternly, "You Su clan of Flying Snow City are really something. How dare you provoke us, the Iron Ghost Soul-Seizing Sect?" The medallion was found among the belongings of White Ghost Immortal and Ghost Lady after they fell on Myriad Immortal's planet 3 years ago. It represented the identity of a core disciple of the Iron Ghost Soul-Seizing Sect. Apart from being used to prove one's identity, the medallion had no other function. Therefore, Wu Qi could easily get his hands on it. Iron Ghost Soul-Seizing Sect was one of the strongest sects among the 7 evil immortal sects in Liyuan Galaxy. Its founding ancestral masters, White Ghost Immortal and Ghost Lady, possessed a profound cultivation base, and bizarre divine abilities. On top of that, they were cruel and merciless, seeking revenge for the smallest grievance. Apart from a few powers, no one in Liyuan Galaxy dared to offend them. Even the strongest cultivator in Shui Yuan planet was merely a nascent divinity cultivator. As one of the 5 major clans in Flying Snow City, the current clan leader of Su clan had just broken through the nascent divinity realm. Compared to an evil sect like Iron Ghost Soul-Seizing Sect, they were nothing. Although White Ghost Immortal and Ghost Lady had fallen, no outsider knew about it. Neither White Cloud Immortal Sect nor Tranquil Vimla Sect were stupid enough to spread this news everywhere. Therefore, in the eyes of everyone in Liyuan Galaxy, Iron Ghost Soul-Seizing Sect was still the strongest immortal sect among the evil sects, and White Ghost Immortal and Ghost Lady were still the leaders of the evil sects that no one dared to offend. When Wu Qi showed the medallion, Su Yi and Su Tai were struck dumb, and all the cultivators of Su clan standing nearby were struck dumb as well. The 4 human immortals of Jin Dan sect, who were arrogantly shouting at Wu Qi just a moment ago, bowed their heads while trembling, and cautiously retreated to a far distance. After all, Su clan did not have any heaven immortal backing them. If they offended a disciple of Iron Ghost Soul-Seizing Sect, with White Ghost Immortal and Ghost Lady's temperament, it would not take them more than 3 months to completely wipe out Su clan. When he thought of the dreadful situation, Su Tai's teeth chattered and produced a loud and clear noise. He stared blankly at the medallion in Wu Qi's palm, then suddenly dropped to his knees and cried out, "Senior Immortal, please understand. It is 9th Young Master who has offended you, and it has nothing to do with the Su clan of Flying Snow City." Su Yi, who was lying on the ground, clutching his lower abdomen and twitching violently, had his face turned deathly pale. He gave Su Tai a venomous look, but dared not to say a word. He had offended a core disciple of Iron Ghost Soul-Seizing Sect. Even if the patriarch of Su clan were here, he would make the same choice as Su Tai, sacrificing a good-for-nothing direct descendant of his clan to apologize to a disciple of Iron Ghost Soul-Seizing Sect. Wu Qi let out a strange laugh and put away the medallion. Abruptly, a misty ghost aura rushed out from behind his back. Activating the Yin Ghost technique taught to him by Princess Zhanglu, the ghost aura around Wu Qi grew stronger and stronger. Ghostly cries kept coming out from under the ground, as if countless vengeful souls were gathering under the ground, and were about to break through the surface and rush into the mortal world at any time. After revealing this technique, Su Tai, Su Yi, and the others were even more convinced that Wu Qi was indeed from Iron Ghost Soul-Seizing Sect. Apart from this group of evil cultivators, who spent all their time dealing with ghosts and monsters, no one in Liyuan Galaxy could have a technique that looked like this. Grinning coldly, Wu Qi walked over and kept stepping on Su Ye's face. Over and over again, Su Ye's head slammed against the ground. Soon, his face was broken by Wu Qi, and all his teeth were spitting out from his mouth. With a cold voice, Wu Qi said, "Let me teach you a lesson. If you bring me the upper-grade energy stones that should be paid for the inner core as soon as possible, and then waive all the fees I paid in your inn, I will forget everything that happened today." Wu Qi forcefully stomped his foot on Su Ye's chest. Su Yi howled miserably, and a large amount of blood burst out from his 7 apertures at the same time. The stomp from Wu Qi had shattered all his ribs, and his internal organs had suffered a tremendous shock, nearly crushed by the stomp. Su Tai answered in fear and trepidation. Without hesitation, he ordered the cultivators of Su clan to carry Su Yi, who was at the brink of death, and dashed out of Snowcloud Courtyard. 15 minutes later, 200,000 upper-grade energy stones were brought before Wu Qi, along with a great amount of fine wine, delicacies, and spirit fruits, which were the specialty of Shui Yuan planet. The chief manager of Huixian Abode, who was also Su Ye's uncle, had personally brought all these things to Wu Qi. Carefully and cautiously, he kept apologizing to Wu Qi. Wu Qi was too lazy to talk to these people. After giving them a few words, he once again reiterated that he did not wish to be disturbed while his senior and junior brother was recuperating. After that, he chased all the mortal family members out. Just as Wu Qi expected, Snowcloud Courtyard became extremely quiet in an instant. Su clan, who were badly frightened by the reputation of Iron Ghost soul-seizing sect, had carefully kept the secret that Wu Qi was recuperating in Snowcloud Courtyard, and did not mention a word about it to Vagabond Qing Yi. Right under the nose of Vagabond Qing Yi and the others, Wu Qi settled down comfortably. Even though immortal Chang Wu, Vagabond Qing Yi, and immortal Xian Yang brought countless cultivators and turned the entire Shui Yuan planet upside down, they could not find even a single hair of Wu Qi. However, the 4 grand universal teleportation formations that connected Shui Yuan planet to the outside world had been completely shut down, and immortal Chang Wu and the other 2 heaven immortals had long locked down the entire planet with a mystic technique. As a result, anyone who used a planetary ship to enter or leave the planet would be discovered immediately. Therefore, they firmly believed that Wu Qi and his company were still hiding on Shui Yuan planet. However, no matter how hard they searched, they just could not find where Wu Qi and his company were hiding. Who would have thought that Wu Qi would actually stay in the most luxurious inn in Flying Snow City, and even stay in the most luxurious courtyard of Huixian Abode in such a high-profile manner? He even brutally beat up the lineal descendants of the owner of Huixian Abode. 2 days later, as Wu Qi kept injecting energies into Yan Qijuan, Xiong Wanling, and He Qianqiu, and fed them immortal pills that could replenish their blood essence and divine energy, Yan Qijuan, who suffered the lightest injury, finally woke up. After that, Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu opened their eyes as well. When they opened their eyes and saw Wu Qi, all 3 of them breathed out a sigh of relief at the same time. With a wry smile on his face, Yan Qijuan said, "I thought we were dead for sure this time. I never thought we could actually come back from the jaws of death." He breathed out a long sigh, staring at Wu Qi suspiciously and asked, "How did you save us from the hands of those heaven immortals?" Wu Qi just laughed and did not answer Yan Qijuan's question. Feeling helpless, Yan Qijuan could only smile wryly. On the other hand, Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu shouted at the top of their lungs that they would take revenge on the enemies by bathing Snowflake City in blood. Wu Qi grinned evilly and told the 3 of them what he wanted to say. "Revenge. We must take revenge on those bastards. But, we have to plan carefully." As the discussion went on, ear-piercing evil laughter could be heard coming from Snowcloud Courtyard from time to time. Chapter 329. Before Wu Qi could say anything, Lin Qiulua's soft cry was suddenly heard coming from the main room, "I'll tell you. I'll tell you everything. Please spare me. I can't take it anymore, I really can't." On top of that, it was an immortal item cultivated by Wu Qi himself with his nascent divinity blood essence. Not only was it easy to control it, its power was also much stronger than other immortal items. It could control the power of thunder, turning it into immortal thunder to attack the enemy. However, Wu Qi already had a cold electric mirror, which could also unleash thunderbolts to attack the enemy. On top of that, the cold electric mirror had already fused with Wu Qi's nascent divinity, allowing him to control it with ease. It was not something that this immortal item, which he seized by force, could compare with. Wu Qi threw the cold electric mirror towards the ball of liquid, and the purple-golden liquid quickly fused into it. The palm-sized mirror gradually expanded, and gradually turned into a round mirror, about 3 feet in diameter and as thin as a cicada's wing. The surface of the mirror was faintly discernible, like a shadow, and it was surrounded by purple thunderclouds. When Wu Qi took a closer look into the mirror, he saw countless electric arcs interweaving in the deep, bottomless mirror. For a moment, it looked as if there were millions of electric serpents slithering quickly inside the mirror, emanating an extremely frightening power. The cracking noises lasted for a full 2 hours, and Lin Qiuluo's cries could be vaguely heard. But very soon, Lin Qiuluo's mouth was gagged by something, and her cries became muffled. Roughly 15 minutes later, the charming slapping noises echoed out once again. Lin Qiuluo's soft panting and moaning could be heard coming from the room, together with Yan Qijuan's scolding and cursing voice. Wu Qi looked at Xiong Wanling's huge body in astonishment. Why did he torture Lin Qiuluo? Was there anyone alive? The soul particles refined by the divine flame of order did not feel any burden when absorbed, nor did they suffer any side effects. Like a large amount of milk being mixed into a cup of water, these soul particles were easily absorbed by Wu Qi. The artifact spirits of immortal artifacts were pure spiritual entities that had cultivated to the level of spirit immortals. Their divine abilities and magic powers were inferior to that of true immortals, but their souls were condensed, and they possessed an astonishing amount of soul origin power. Wu Qi absorbed the soul particles transformed from the item spirit of the immortal item. Instantly, his fist-sized golden nascent divinity expanded several times, while his 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls grew rapidly like bean sprouts. A purple-blue beam shot out from between Wu Qi's brows, and the cold electric mirror flew out from between his brows. Such a large snowflake fell on the snowy ground and made a rustling sound, making the world seem so quiet. It took Wu Qi 3 days and 3 nights to refine the 2 treasures. As he rose to his feet, Wu Qi was about to call out to Yan Qijuan. Since Lin Qiuluo refused to tell him the information Wu Qi wanted to know, there was no need to torture her in this way. He could just use physical torture, or simply use a spell of hypnosis to control her nascent divinity. Wouldn't that solve the problem? Xiong Wanling's long tongue licked the bridge of his nose, and a wild and ferocious look emerged on his face. Suddenly, a clear and melodious clanking noise was heard coming from the main room. Yan Qijuan was in the middle of interrogating Lin Qiuluo, trying to find out who paid a great price to hire her to assassinate him. Apart from the cause and effect of the assassination, Wu Qi also asked Yan Qijuan to find out how strong the forces under Immortal Chang Wu and the other 2 heaven immortals were, and the overall strength of the 3 major clans in Snowflake City. This shuttle-shaped magical item was the immortal item Lin Qiuluo used to hunt down Yan Qijuan and his company. Since Wu Qi had stripped off her immortal armor, he would not let go of this immortal item. While Yan Qijuan was interrogating Lin Qiuluo, Wu Qi had just finished digesting the immortal item. If he wanted to take revenge on the other party, if he didn't even know the other party's strength and rashly fought with the other party, it wouldn't be taking revenge, it would be courting death. Then, Wu Qi pointed his finger out. The phoenix fire pouch flew out and quickly landed under the shuttle-shaped immortal item. A divine flame of purple and green surged out, wheeling around the immortal item and burning fiercely. The immortal item trembled violently. Using his divine will, Wu Qi immediately sensed the item spirit howling miserably at the top of his lungs. But, Wu Qi did not pay any attention to the item spirit struggling and begging. With a cold heart, he used the divine flame of order to completely refine the item spirit. The divine flame of order had a very strong lethality to all spirit bodies and nascent divinities, not to mention that Lin Qiuluo had overdrawn her source energy and damaged its foundation. The item spirit did not last long before it was completely refined by the divine flame of order into countless colorful soul particles, glinting with a magnificent light that could intoxicate one's mind. Wu Qi took a deep breath. A bright beam shot out from his forehead, sucking all the soul particles into his spiritual ocean and fusing them with his nascent divinity. There was a distance of several tens of feet to several hundred feet between Wu Qi, Xiong Wanling, He Qianqiu, and Yan Qijuan. If Lin Qiuluo made a sound, or immortal Chang Wu struck, Wu Qi could only ensure that he could escape safely, but he could not do anything about the safety of the others. Although it was just a spirit item, after refining it, Wu Qi had fused a clump of energy essence from it into the earth element dragon scale shield. After that, 36,000 dragon scales fused with the energy essence from the immortal armor and the whip, causing their color to change slightly. They became thinner and sharper, but also heavier. Wu Qi wailed in his mind, "Yan Qijuan, you must not let Lin Qiulua make any noise now, or you will be in big trouble." After that, Wu Qi took out the white whip which was used by Lin Qiulua. This long whip was just an ordinary spirit artifact, not an immortal artifact. Lin Qiulua was just one of immortal Chang Wu's companions, and it was already an incredible thing for her to have an immortal armor and a shuttle-shaped thunder immortal item. If this whip was also an immortal item, Wu Qi would suspect that immortal Chang Wu had discovered some cave abode left behind by some ancient immortals. The white gust rolled up countless snowflakes and smashed viciously onto the defensive barrier above Flying Snow City. The green barrier shook and shook, completely neutralizing the fierce gust of wind. The palm-sized snowflakes had lost their arrogant momentum of destroying and drowning everything. Lazily, they passed through the barrier and drifted down slowly. Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu, who had not fully recovered from their injuries and were still staggering when they walked, came out from their rooms. With a ferocious face, Xiong Wanling cried out in a low voice, "Crown Prince, quickly ask this girl to confess, tell us everything we want to know. Otherwise, I don't care if she doesn't have any hair on her body or if she's a little ugly. I, Old Bear, will personally go into battle and torture her." He casually swept his divine will around, and all the movements within the area of 1,000 miles around him appeared in his mind. The trajectories of the 789,457 snowflakes that fell down from the sky above Flying Snow City at the same time appeared clearly in his spiritual ocean. A satisfied smile appeared on Wu Qi's face. His divine will had grown a few times stronger, especially his nascent divinity, which had become extremely condensed and strong. In terms of quality, the nascent divinity of ordinary nascent divinity cultivators was far inferior to Wu Qi's nascent divinity. After all, what he had just absorbed was all the soul source energy of an immortal item's item spirit. A light cough was heard, as an old man with white hair walked into Snowcloud Courtyard. Standing in the courtyard with his hands clasped behind his back, Wu Qi raised his head and looked at the sky, then turned to look at the main house behind him. He had a strange expression on his face. While he was chatting and laughing, an old voice suddenly came from the front door, "May I ask if fellow Taoist from Iron Ghost Soul-Seizing Sect is here? I, Su Qiangu, have something to pay a visit to you." In the main house, Yan Qijuan had been torturing Lin Qiulua for 3 days and 3 nights. During this period of 72 hours, Yan Qijuan did not stop at all, and the loud smacking noises kept ringing out. After learning the news from the celestial fiend puppets, Wu Qi could not help but roll his eyes. Isn't Yan Qijuan a little too fierce? Yan Qijuan's complacent, almost insolent laughter rang out. Wu Qi turned to look at the main house in astonishment. Did he really succeed in the interrogation? Wu Qi was taken aback, then said hastily, "Please." In Snowcloud Courtyard, there were several dozens of old plum blossoms that were at least 1,000 years old. Their dark trunks were covered with moss, and on their twisting branches that looked like dragons, there were at most 40 to 50 plum blossoms blooming on each of them. Although the number of blossoms was less, each of them was as big as a human fist, with white petals and green pistils. A faint fragrance was lingering in the courtyard, and together with the snowflakes falling from the sky, it was a beautiful scene. Lin Qiulua's cries and curses were heard coming from the main house once again. But this time, there was an indescribable wetness in her voice. Yan Qijuan was laughing coldly in a low voice. Accompanied by the smacking noises, Wu Qi could not help but feel his body burning up. Shaking his head, Wu Qi twitched his lips and thought, "What is this? My father-in-law is interrogating the enemy inside, while I'm eavesdropping outside. If someone knows about this. What a cruel interrogation." Wu Qi shook his head, tucked both hands under his sleeves, threw his head back, sighed and said, "As his son-in-law, it is really not easy for me to serve my father-in-law, Lao Tzu, to such an extent. Not only did I help him capture the enemy alive, I even had to strip him naked, tie him up, and throw him on the bed for him to torture. Fortunately, my father-in-law, Lao Tzu's wife has been dead for 2,000 years, and he hasn't appointed a new wife yet. Otherwise, how am I going to explain this to my mother-in-law? A satisfied smile appeared on his face, and he retracted the phoenix fire pouch back into his spiritual ocean. After that, a bright beam shot out from between Wu Qi's brows, and the cold electric mirror had once again fused back into his forehead. However, because the cold electric mirror had gone through a qualitative change, the originally thin purple line had now transformed into a glinting purple erect eye. The erect eye was glinting brightly right between Wu Qi's brows, giving him a mighty and domineering aura out of nowhere. Suddenly, the sound of a teacup falling to the ground was heard coming from the main house. Shaking his head, he sat cross-legged on the snowy ground. A few celestial fiend puppets who had transformed into hideous Taoists emerged from the surrounding air, occupying various vital spots in the courtyard. Carefully, Wu Qi fished out an object from under his sleeve. It was a shuttle-shaped magical item about the size of a rugby ball, emitting faintly discernible thunderbolts. The spirit-restricting rope was firmly tied around the Dharma artifact, completely restricting its power. Waving his wrist satisfyingly, Wu Qi was very satisfied with the transformation of the earth element dragon scale shield. As he continued to craft it meticulously, as long as he kept giving it more chances to evolve, he would never waste that ball of innate earth element energy essence, and would definitely give it the power it should have. What made Wu Qi's neck tighten was the fact that immortal Chang Wu, who had an unsightly expression on his face, was standing right next to the old man. With a wry smile, Wu Qi sighed and said, "Sigh, a prodigal son is always a prodigal son. This father-in-law of mine, I really can't say anything about him." After devouring all the materials and essence of an immortal artifact, with the exception of the artifact spirit, the cold electric mirror immediately underwent a world-shaking transformation. The quality of the mirror rose greatly and it became no different from an immortal artifact. As long as the faintly discernible thread of consciousness within the cold electric mirror could cultivate to become a spirit immortal under the nourishment of Wu Qi's nascent divinity, it would immediately transform into an immortal item-grade mirror. Su Qiangu came before Wu Qi, extended his hand and introduced Immortal Chang Wu, Senior, "This is the master of Great Martial Palace, Immortal Chang Wu." After the item's spirit was taken away, the immortal item immediately disintegrated into a clump of golden-purple liquid, within which countless tiny electric arcs could be seen blinking rapidly. Chapter 330. Inside the main room, the naked Yan Qijuan was drenched in cold sweat. He stared blankly at the broken teacup on the floor, then turned to look at Lin Qiulua, who was lying on the table with her fair buttocks raised high up into the air, and was now in a semi-conscious state. He shuddered violently. The immortal pressure emanating from the courtyard was so clear that it felt like a steel blade was slicing and cutting Yan Qijuan's body. A heaven immortal had come to Snowcloud Courtyard? How many heaven immortals were there in Flying Snow City? Was it not just immortal Chang Wu and his companions? Su Qiangu introduced the master of Great Martial Palace, Immortal Chang Wu, and the faint immortal pressure emanating from him. While he was torturing Immortal Chang Wu's wife, Immortal Chang Wu, he was in the courtyard. Beads of cold sweat were breaking out from Yan Qijuan's body, trickling down his skin. Just now, it was Lin Qiulua who had unconsciously waved her hand, causing a teacup on the table to fall to the ground and shatter into pieces. If Immortal Chang Wu sent his divine will into the room, then... Yan Qijuan narrowed his eyes. Suddenly, he laughed evilly and said, "Little beauty, you sure are hot." While uttering obscene words, Yan Qijuan swept all the teacups on the table to the ground, then covered Lin Qiulua's mouth with one hand and plunged into her body. A series of cracking noises echoed out, as Lin Qiulua let out an indistinct howl. But, as Yan Qijuan covered her mouth with his palm, the howl turned into a moan. Snowflakes kept falling down from the courtyard. Upon hearing the strange noises coming from the main room, Wu Qi grinned and said, "So, it's Senior Chang Wu. This way, please. I happen to have some nice tea leaves here, and I hope Senior can have a taste of them." Right when Immortal Chang Wu entered the room, he suddenly heard the cracking noises coming from the main room. he was about to send out his divine will to find out what was going on in the room. But, the strange noises that came one after another made immortal Chang Wu give up the idea of using his divine will. Disdainfully, he gave Wu Qi a sidelong glance. These cultivators from the evil path were always like this, doing dirty things in the house in broad daylight. They were filthy and despicable to the extreme. As a mighty heaven immortal, how could immortal Chang Wu use his divine will to investigate the dirty affairs of a few juniors? Immortal Chang Wu quickly retracted his divine will, nodded at Wu Qi, and said coolly, "Good tea leaves?" "Perfect." Wu Qi turned around to look at the main house. Cold sweat broke out on his back and was quickly frozen into ice shards by the cold wind. They formed on Wu Qi's back, and the chill was unbearable. Wu Qi was amazed in his mind. Fortunately, Yan Qijuan reacted in time and made such a big move. Otherwise, if immortal Chang Wu sent his divine will into the cave and saw how his wife was being treated by Yan Qijuan, he would most likely kill her right away, and Wu Qi would have no choice but to flee. Now, as a dignified heaven immortal, he would never peep into the private affairs of his juniors. Wu Qi breathed out a sigh of relief. Without hesitation, he led Su Qiangu and immortal Chang Wu into the wing room on the west side. Two celestial fiend puppets quickly found a tea set, then collected a urn of snow water from the petals of the plum blossoms in the courtyard, lit a fire in a small clay stove, and began boiling the water at the entrance of the wing room. Wu Qi handed over a bag of wild spirit tea harvested from the depths of Meng Mountains to the two celestial fiend puppets, then said solemnly, "Seniors, we are honored by your presence. Junior brothers, please make a cup of fragrant tea for us, and don't neglect it." One of the puppets grinned, then said with a hoarse voice that sounded like the friction between a steel blade and a hacksaw, "Rest assured, senior brother. It will be done properly." Only then did Wu Qi enter the wing room, cupping his fist and bowing respectfully to immortal Chang Wu, who was sitting on the host seat. "May I know what brings you here, senior brother?" Immortal Chang Wu gave two celestial fiend puppets, who were squatting at the entrance and boiling the tea, and snorted indifferently. Su Qiangu rose to his feet hastily, smiled at Wu Qi, and said, "I heard from those few good-for-nothing clan members that fellow Taoist is from Iron Ghost soul-seizing sect? May I ask fellow Taoist?" Wu Qi narrowed his eyes, smiled, and said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "I'm Fifth Ghost." Immortal Chang Wu narrowed his eyes and nodded slowly. Su Qiangu gave immortal Chang Wu a look, smiled, and said, "Fellow Taoist Fifth Ghost, I've long heard of your name." This is what happened. For the past few days, Senior Chang Wu and the other two seniors had sealed off the Grand Universal Teleportation Formation in Shui Yuan Planet, trying to capture a few reckless cultivators. However, it seems they have an extraordinary artifact, which allows them to travel at a very fast speed, and is an expert in hiding their aura. Therefore, we haven't found any trace of them in the past few days. Wu Qi smiled, shook his head, sighed, and said, "If that is the case, perhaps they have already left Shui Yuan Planet?" "Impossible," said immortal Chang Wu coolly. "Vagabond Qing Yi has already sealed off the sky above Shui Yuan Planet with the sky net, and the three of us have also laid out a restrictive spell. No one can leave Shui Yuan Planet without alerting us. I'm sure they are still in Shui Yuan Planet, but we have no idea where they are hiding." With a wave of his palm, a sheet of green light shot out, amidst which emerged Wu Qi, Yan Qijuan, Xiong Wanling, and He Qianqiu. Immortal Chang Wu said coldly, "Shui Yuan Planet is surrounded by Xianbing snowfields, and there are countless caves that they can hide in. Even with our divine will of Heaven Immortal Realm, it is impossible for us to search the entire planet in a blink of an eye and find them." Su Qiangu gave immortal Chang Wu another look, chuckled, and said, "Iron Ghost Soul-Seizing Sect is an expert in controlling ghosts. I wonder how many ghosts can fellow Taoist Fifth Ghost control?" Wu Qi cried out as if he was suddenly enlightened, "Seniors, do you mean to let me control the ghosts and search the entire Shui Yuan Planet?" Inwardly, Wu Qi was laughing. This immortal Chang Wu is indeed a good schemer. Even for a heaven immortal, it was impossible for him to unleash his divine will and see everything with a single glance. When 3 heaven immortals joined hands to search the entire Shui Yuan planet, there would always be some flaws that could be exploited. However, the technique used by Iron Ghost soul-seizing sect to control Yin ghosts was different. By releasing tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of Yin ghosts at the same time, they could search a very large area. On top of that, Yin ghosts were ghosts that had no form or substance, so they could enter and leave any Xian Bing or seawater at will. In front of these ghosts, there were no blind spots or hiding spots. With the help of Yin ghosts and the divine will of 3 heaven immortals, there was a real possibility that they could find out where Wu Qi and his company were. Wu Qi put on a hesitant face and did not say a word for a long while. Upon seeing Wu Qi's reaction, Immortal Cheng Wu could not help but frown. He lightly knocked on the armrest of the chair and said coolly, "Fifth ghost, work hard for me, and I won't let you suffer any losses." Iron Ghost soul-seizing sect has a friendly relationship with Grand Marshal Palace. When I meet your ancestral masters in the future, I can put in a few good words for you. While Wu Qi was pondering for a while, 2 celestial fiend puppets carefully walked up to him, each carrying a tray with 3 cups of tea. Hastily, Wu Qi took over the tray, then respectfully served a cup of tea to both Immortal Chang Wu and Su Qiangu. "Seniors, please have a taste of the finest spirit tea we've gathered," said Wu Qi respectfully. A spirit tea of this grade is very rare nowadays. Immortal Chang Wu and Su Qiangu exchanged a glance, then picked up their teacups disapprovingly. In their eyes, Wu Qi was just a Jin Dan realm disciple of Iron Ghost soul-seizing sect, and a Jin Dan human immortal was an insignificant figure among all the immortal sections. So, what kind of excellent tea could he possibly gather? However, when the lid of the teacup was lifted, Immortal Chang Wu could not help but give a shout of praise. As soon as the lid of the porcelain teacup was lifted, a tiny wisp of white smoke rose slowly from the tea, rising 3 feet high like a tornado. After that, the wisp of white smoke twisted and squirmed gracefully in the air, transforming into a clump of Ganoderma-shaped smoke and slowly dispersing. Immediately, a delicate fragrance filled the air, and a fragrance that could make one's pores open up uncontrollably filled the entire room. Excellent tea. It is indeed a supreme-grade tea. Immortal Chang Wu sniffed the aroma with great interest, then looked at the floating tea leaves in the green tea. Shaking his head, he picked up the teacup and slowly took a sip of the fragrant tea. As soon as the tea entered his mouth, it tasted like a mouthful of buttermilk, slipping from the tip of his tongue all the way into his stomach. Gulp! A clump of hot air and rich aroma exploded in his stomach, and a strange fragrance flowed through his entire body, making him feel warm and comfortable. It was as if the fragrance was spreading out from his pores. Immortal Chang Wu felt refreshed, and an indescribable feeling of comfort nearly made him moan. For a moment, he forgot that Lin Qiulua had fallen into the enemy's hands, forgot that he still had to hunt down those few reckless cultivators, and forgot all the troubles in the world. The aroma of the tea was simply too magical. Immortal Chang Wu could not help but pick up the teacup once again. This time, he finished the tea in one gulp. Similarly, Su Qiangu picked up the teacup and took a sip of the tea as well. He could not help but praise, "Fragrant and fragrant, this is indeed a supreme-grade tea." Holding the teacup in his hand, Wu Qi looked at Immortal Chang Wu and Su Qiangu without saying a word. After a while, he asked leisurely, "Seniors, do you feel comfortable?" "I feel like I'm floating in the air, like a feather flying in the sky, feeling extremely relaxed and happy." Su Qiangu raised his head slowly, gave Wu Qi a smile, and fell to the ground. Immortal Chang Wu looked at Su Qiangu with a puzzled expression, then asked with a stammering voice, What happened?" Wu Qi casually threw the teacup to the ground, gave Immortal Chang Wu a strange look, smiled, and said, "I never expected that you would bring yourself to me. 100 times the amount of drunken dragon incense, and it looks like the effect is pretty good. Drunken dragon incense can really knock out a heaven immortal." "You!" Immortal Chang Wu rose to his feet, his body trembling. Lightly, he raised his hand and slowly pointed at Wu Qi. Immortal Chang Wu gave Wu Qi a lazy and delicate glance, then slowly opened his mouth. But, before he could let out any scolding words, he had already fallen headfirst to the ground and fell into a deep sleep. His face was flushed, as if he was drunk, and a strong fragrance was emanating from his body. Next to him, two celestial fiend puppets let out a ferocious laugh. Wu Qi breathed out a faint sigh. He came next to Su Qiangu, and deftly removed all the valuables from his body. After that, the spirit-restricting rope transformed into a beam of purple light and flew out, coiling around Immortal Chang Wu's body for 7 to 8 rounds, tying him up like a rice dumpling. Completely defenseless, Immortal Chang Wu was tied up by the spirit-restricting rope, and had completely lost the chance to turn the tables. After shoving Immortal Chang Wu into the spirit-breeding ring, Wu Qi laughed and said, "Let's go. Let's go. A heaven immortal. We're going to make a fortune." In a flurry, Wu Qi shoved Yan Qijuan and the others into the spirit-breeding ring, changed his clothes, and changed his visage, before rushing out of Snowcloud Courtyard. Right when he stepped out of the courtyard, an immortal pressure suddenly descended from above. A figure flashed across the sky, as Vagabond Qing Yi stepped on an auspicious cloud and stopped before Wu Qi. Chapter 331. Sitting on the ground, shivering, Wu Qi cried out miserably, "I'm just here to do business with fellow Taoists from Iron Ghost Soul-Seizing Sect. Just now, I bought some rare items from them." After that, Senior Chang Wu came. They exchanged a few words and left. "I have no idea what they are going to do. I'm just here to exchange some rare materials with fellow Taoists from Iron Ghost Soul-Seizing Sect." However, the 3 green jade rings worn on Vagabond Qing Yi's fingers emitted a large sheet of bright lights at the same time. Like countless tiny needles, they pierced towards Wu Qi's body. Wu Qi felt a chill run through his body. Before the bright lights could touch his body, countless tiny wounds had already appeared on his skin, and countless drops of blood were poking out from his skin, making him look like a man of blood. However, it was a matter of great profit. When he thought that Immortal Chang Wu might be bringing the people from Iron Ghost Soul-Seizing Sect to search for more spirit herbs of 3,000 years, Vagabond Qing Yi felt a sharp pain in his heart. He fixed his eyes on Wu Qi and cried out sternly, "Tell me where they are now. Or else, I don't mind seizing your soul and searching for everything I want." Suddenly, Immortal Xian Yang coughed out 3 mouthfuls of warm blood. Then, a pair of blood-red flaming wings sprouted out from his back. With his bloodshot eyes wide open, Immortal Xian Yang transformed into a beam of flame and chased after Wu Qi. In just a blink of an eye, Immortal Xian Yang's flying speed had surpassed Wu Qi, who was fleeing with the chariot of 8 horses. With a flap of the flaming wings, he had caught up with Wu Qi in just a blink of an eye. He grabbed the bag and fished out the few spirit herbs from within, then cried out in shock, 3,000 years old green radish. This is the main ingredient for concocting 7 orifices spirit cleansing pill. 3,000 years old green radish? Where did these juniors from Iron Ghost Soul-Seizing Sect get them? Viciously, Vagabond Qing Yi turned to look at Wu Qi and cried out coldly, "Junior, what did you exchange with them for these spirit herbs?" If not because Vagabond Qing Yi suddenly sensed that Immortal Chang Wu's aura had disappeared from Flying Snow City, he would not have come here. But, when he arrived, he found that Immortal Chang Wu was indeed gone. But, this was too strange. Didn't they have an appointment? Vagabond Qing Yi stared at Wu Qi without saying a word. With trembling hands, Wu Qi fished out a bag from Black Dragon's spirit ring, then handed it over to Vagabond Qing Yi and said, Senior, this is the item I wanted to trade with them." Junior's words are all true, not a single one is false. Immortal Xian Yang threw his head back and roared furiously, "You Flying Snow City are a bunch of trash. Brat, how dare you? How did you plot against fellow Immortal Qing Yi?" Immortal Xian Yang bellowed furiously, "Quickly stop and surrender. Great Immortal, I'll leave your corpse intact." Being blinded by greed, Vagabond Qing Yi had completely overlooked one fact: if Immortal Chang Wu really brought the people of Iron Ghost Soul-Seizing Sect away because of Qing Shiro, why would he allow Wu Qi to leave Snowcloud Courtyard safely? For a person and something related to a precious treasure, it was necessary to have them in his hands. As such, Wu Qi would either be taken away by immortal Chang Wu, or be killed to keep his mouth shut. It was impossible for him to leave safely. Roaring furiously, Wu Qi transformed into a dark sword beam and was about to rush out of Huixian abode. Before he could finish his words, Vagabond Xing Yi's vision darkened. His body went limp and fell heavily to the ground. Wu Qi roared with extreme pain. A clump of yellow light burst out from the earth element dragon scale shield and tightly wrapped around his body. Countless five-colored light beams smashed onto the dragon scale shield, producing deep, muffled booms that sounded like thunder. Wu Qi's body swayed violently, and he was nearly knocked flying away by the seemingly insignificant five-colored light beams. Hastily, he widened his eyes, from which a tiny green-purple divine flame shot out. Vagabond Qing Yi was taken aback and cried out, "What? What drunken dragon incense?" Wu Qi stared blankly at Vagabond Qing Yi. Wisps of green mist sprayed out from the mouth of the storage bag, while Vagabond Qing Yi was wrapped up by the green mist. Curious, Wu Qi asked, "Senior, do you still have the strength to talk after inhaling so much drunken dragon incense? Don't you feel that your body is a little weak, your vision is a little dark, and you can no longer circulate your immortal energy?" Another clump of seven-colored light wrapped around Wu Qi. Abruptly, he transformed into a tiny beam of light and sped out of Flying Snow City. The restrictive barrier hovering above Flying Snow City could not stop Wu Qi at all, as it was shattered into pieces by the seven-colored light beam unleashed by the chariot of 8 horses. A furious roar rang out, as immortal Xian Yang's huge hand that was burning with raging flame grabbed towards Wu Qi, who was trapped in the chariot. Vagabond Qing Yi's eyes went wide with astonishment. He turned to look at the main entrance of Snowcloud Courtyard and murmured coldly, "What is Chang Wu doing? Didn't we come to an agreement that the three of us will work together? Why did he leave in such a hurry with the people of Iron Ghost's soul-seizing sect? Could there be some unforeseen event?" He held the storage bag tightly, its mouth opened, and a delicate fragrance kept wafting out from it. Green-black radish was a herb that carried a natural fragrance. Therefore, Vagabond Qing Yi did not pay too much attention to the fragrance. He fixed his gaze at Wu Qi, trying to force him to tell him where immortal Chang Wu had gone. If the cultivators of Iron Ghost's soul-seizing sect had really found these 3,000-year-old green-black radishes on Shui Yuan planet, then there must be other treasures at the place where they found the spirit herbs. If not, immortal Chang Wu would not leave in such a hurry. Wu Qi let out a loud laugh and said, "Old fogey Xian Yang, wash your neck and wait for me to chop off your dog head." Wu Qi's eyes went wide as he cried out in surprise, "It's true that this is a green-black radish, but 3,000-year-old. Are you kidding me? How can there be a 3,000-year-old immortal herb in this world?" After a brief moment of pondering, Vagabond Qing Yi glared at Wu Qi and cried out, "Who are you? Why did you come out from this courtyard?" Following Vagabond Qing Yi's rebuke, a tremendous immortal pressure suddenly descended upon Wu Qi. Very cooperatively, Wu Qi tilted his body and sat on the ground in a sorry state. He stared at Vagabond Qing Yi with a terrified expression as if he had just seen a ghost. His face was even paler than the snow. "Bastard," cursed Wu Qi. Shivering from the pain, Wu Qi scolded under his breath, "Bastard. Vagabond Qing Yi, just wait and see how I'm going to deal with you later." How could Vagabond Qing Yi take a fancy to the storage bag given to him by Wu Qi? What good item could a puny cultivator of the Jin Dan trade for? With a casual slap, Vagabond Qing Yi threw the storage bag onto the snowy ground several hundred feet away, then cried out coldly, "Did you see clearly? Which direction did they go?" Wu Qi let out a joyful cry and leaped forward hastily. Without any hesitation, he fished out a large handful of drunken dragon incense from the storage bag, opened Vagabond Qing Yi's mouth, and poured all of it into his mouth. When the drunken dragon incense came into contact with his saliva, it immediately turned into a green liquid and fused into Vagabond Qing Yi's body. With the amount of drunken dragon incense Wu Qi poured into Vagabond Qing Yi's mouth, it could even knock out 100 heaven immortals. Perhaps, Vagabond Qing Yi would not be able to wake up on his own for the rest of his life. Vagabond Qing Yi roared furiously, then glared at Wu Qi and said, "Tell me. Which direction did they go?" Seeing that immortal Xian Yang was approaching, Wu Qi immediately unleashed the chariot of 8 horses. Vagabond Qing Yi came to his senses abruptly. Immortal Chang Wu came to look for the cultivators of Iron Ghost soul-seizing sect, but in the end, he suddenly brought his men and disappeared without a trace, without even informing him. In the world of cultivation, there was only one circumstance that would happen: Immortal Chang Wu had found something that could interest him. Otherwise, he would not run away so abruptly. Laughing wildly, Wu Qi grabbed Vagabond Qing Yi and was about to shove him into the spirit breeding ring. At the thought of this, Vagabond Qing Yi's eyes burned with fire. He was sure that immortal Chang Wu must have found something. But, in order to reap all the benefits himself, he had left with the people of Iron Ghost soul-seizing sect without caring about his Taoist companion who had fallen into the hands of the enemy, and the search for the whereabouts of those cultivators who had destroyed Snowflake City. Everything went smoothly when he was dealing with immortal Chang Wu just now. Therefore, Wu Qi had neglected this matter. Now, when he was attacked by Vagabond Qing Yi's jade ring, it suddenly dawned on Wu Qi: Vagabond Qing Yi was a heaven immortal, and he must have an immortal item with him. The reason why an immortal item was called an immortal item was that its item spirit had cultivated to the realm of spirit immortal, possessing the intelligence of its own, which allowed it to defend its owner and attack the enemy. With a moment of carelessness, Wu Qi was severely wounded by the 5 colored beams. Countless tiny threads of blood burst out from all over his body, forming a clump of blood mist that enveloped Wu Qi, making him look ferocious. The 5 colored beams pierced into Wu Qi's body, crazily destroying his body tissues. Some of them even brought with them an immense coldness, rushing straight into Wu Qi's spiritual ocean, as if they were going to slaughter his soul. Vagabond Qing Yi stood on the cloud with a frown on his face, staring coldly at Wu Qi. With a faint immortal pressure suppressing Wu Qi, Vagabond Qing Yi cried out coldly, "Where are the people in this courtyard?" Right after Wu Qi walked out from the courtyard, Vagabond Qing Yi scanned the courtyard with his divine will. Naturally, he found no one in the courtyard. Trembling, Wu Qi looked at Vagabond Qing Yi and said humbly, "Are you asking about the people in Snowcloud Courtyard? They have left just now." Seeing that Wu Qi had transformed into the familiar 7-colored beam and fled, immortal Xian Yang flew into a rage. Never in his wildest dreams did he expect that Wu Qi was still hiding in the city, safe and sound, and it seemed like he had even plotted against Vagabond Qing Yi. Before Wu Qi could answer Vagabond Qing Yi's question, Vagabond Qing Yi cried out in alarm. Like a hungry wolf who had just seen a piece of meat, he leaped down from the cloud and dashed out, grabbing the brocade bag that fell on the ground. Just a moment ago, Vagabond Qing Yi did not take Wu Qi's brocade bag seriously, and casually threw it far away. But now, the opening of the brocade bag was loosened, revealing a few vaguely transparent spirit herbs that looked like reeds, green in color, and had leaves that looked like they were carved out of jade. Vagabond Qing Yi frowned as he gave Wu Qi an appraising glance. He had a feeling that there was something strange about Wu Qi. Immortal Chang Wu had made an agreement with them, that when the people from Iron Ghost soul-seizing sect drove the Yin ghosts to search for Yan Qijuan and his company, they would work together and capture Yan Qijuan and his company alive. However, immortal Chang Wu had suddenly disappeared without a trace, while Wu Qi walked out from the empty Snowcloud courtyard. This made Vagabond Qing Yi feel extremely strange. The divine flame of order smashed viciously onto the 3 green jade rings. All of a sudden, a miserable howl that could only be sensed by divine will was heard coming out from the rings, while countless 5-colored beams vanished abruptly. With one swift move, Wu Qi grabbed the rings and ripped them off, then grabbed Vagabond Qing Yi and shoved him into Black Dragon's spirit ring. However, Vagabond Qing Yi's aura had suddenly disappeared from Flying Snow City, and his immortal item had automatically attacked to protect its owner. The commotion had alerted the last immortal in Flying Snow City, immortal Xian Yang. A raging flame rose from the peak of a snowy mountain in the distance, as immortal Xian Yang, whose body was wrapped in a crimson flame, roared furiously and rushed towards them. Vagabond Qing Yi's face darkened as he sneered and said, "How presumptuous! How could I mistake the age of these spirit herbs? If I said they are 3,000 years old green radishes, then they must be 3,000 years old. Tell me, where did those juniors get these spirit herbs? Something is not right." Chapter 332. The chariot of 8 horses was the most precious treasure of the ancient human emperor. Although Wu Qi could borrow the power of the chariot by deceiving the heavens, as his cultivation base was not strong enough, he could not fully utilize all the magical abilities of the ancient treasure. Although he could transform into a rainbow beam and travel with it, compared to the maximum speed of the chariot, there was still a huge gap. Immortal Xian Yang did not hesitate to consume 3 mouthfuls of his prime blood essence and exercised a mystic technique to produce a pair of flaming wings, which boosted his speed to an astonishing level. In just a blink of an eye, he had caught up to the chariot. Then, he clenched his fist, and a large sheet of flame burst out from his 5 fingers. A huge hand that was translucent like a crystal, emanating a threatening heat, shot whistling out, grabbing viciously towards Wu Qi's head. Wu Qi was sitting calmly in the chariot. Initially, he thought that immortal Xian Yang would not be able to catch up to him. Unexpectedly, right after he flew out from Flying Snow City, a large sheet of red light enveloped him. Using a mystic technique, immortal Xian Yang had actually caught up to him. With great astonishment, Wu Qi turned his head and looked over his shoulder. Amidst the large sheet of flame, he saw a pair of flaming wings, each several tens of feet long, flapping at high speed behind immortal Xian Yang's back. His facial expression had turned very strange as well. His nose and mouth were protruding out, turning into a huge bird beak. His eyes were gleaming with a threatening gleam, and his skin was covered with countless red feathers. The feathers on his body were shaped like the feathers of a peacock, crimson in color, and densely packed with runes and patterns. At this moment, they were emanating a tremendous heat. The natural energies kept being channeled into these feathers, and after being transformed by the runes and patterns on them, they were transformed into crimson flames and injected into the pair of wings on immortal Xian Yang's back. After that, they burst out violently. Behind immortal Xian Yang's back, a stream of flame stretched over 100 miles long, turning half of the sky red. While Wu Qi was still sizing up immortal Xian Yang, the several tens of feet wide crimson palm had already come pressing down forcefully, slapping viciously onto the rainbow glow emitting from the chariot of 8 horses. Immediately, a loud rumble rang out, and a 7-colored auspicious ray burst out from the chariot, expanding into a huge 7-colored cloud that measured several miles in circumference. Countless fist-sized golden runes that looked like they were made of solid gold flickered in the sky amidst the 7-colored auspicious clouds, releasing a tremendous pressure that made it hard for people to breathe. Then, the giant red palm shattered into pieces. Suddenly, from the left side of the chariot of 8 horses, 12 armored soldiers who stood over 60 feet tall, clad in golden armors, wielding long halberds in their hands as they charged towards immortal Xian Yang. The cultivation of these armored soldiers was roughly the same as the current Wu Qi, which was a mid-grade Jin Dan cultivation. Although their cultivation base was not strong, the speed of these armored soldiers, who even Wu Qi had no idea where they came from, was frighteningly fast. The long halberds pierced through the air, producing a jarring noise as they thrust viciously towards immortal Xian Yang's chest. Immortal Xian Yang flapped the flaming wings behind his back and roared, "Get the hell away from me." Then, he waved both arms to the left and right, unleashing a large sheet of flame. The 7-colored auspicious ray of the chariot of 8 horses did not budge at all, but the 12 armored soldiers were ripped to shreds. Amidst the boundless flame, they were burned into a rain of light that drifted in the air. Immortal Xian Yang glared furiously at Wu Qi, who was shrouded in the 7-colored auspicious ray, and cried out, "What an audacious junior! I can't believe you actually have such an extraordinary defensive treasure." Licking his lips greedily, immortal Xian Yang laughed and said, "What grade is this immortal item? It must be a defensive treasure crafted by an immortal who is at least an 18th tier heaven immortal. Strange, with your mere cultivation base of Jin Dan, how could you control an immortal item? This doesn't make sense. There is no way you can control an immortal item. Wu Qi decided to stop the chariot of 8 horses. Since immortal Xian Yang had already seen the true form of the chariot, he might as well stop the chariot and explain it to him. The gigantic palm strike unleashed by immortal Xian Yang just now was shattered by the counterforce of the chariot of 8 horses. Wu Qi's confidence in the defensive strength of the chariot of 8 horses had increased by 100 times. Even if he had to face a heaven immortal head-on, he had nothing to fear. Upon hearing immortal Xian Yang's words, Wu Qi grinned coldly and was about to answer him, but all of a sudden, the row of golden bells hanging on the chariot's hood began to move and tinkle, even though there was no wind blowing. As the bells tinkled, the surrounding auspicious clouds suddenly rocked and rocked. 24 golden-armored soldiers holding long halberds in their hands rushed out, stepping on the auspicious clouds once again, transforming into streams of light as they charged towards immortal Xian Yang. Immortal Xian Yang flapped his wings as he stared at these golden-armored soldiers arrogantly. This time, these soldiers merely possessed the cultivation base of upper-grade Jin Dan. Immortal Xian Yang sneered. With a light flick of his finger, a large sheet of crimson flame sprayed out, burning all 24 armored soldiers into countless specks of light that drifted down from the sky. Sitting coldly on the chariot, Wu Qi stared at immortal Xian Yang. This was the first time Wu Qi was facing a real heaven immortal. Immortal Xian Yang's strange visage, as well as the pair of flaming wings behind his back, had aroused Wu Qi's curiosity. Not only the visage, the pair of flaming wings were actually attached tightly to immortal Xian Yang's body like real wings made of flesh, as if they were grown out from his flesh and blood, and not some illusory image formed from flames. While Wu Qi was thinking about how to deal with immortal Xian Yang, the golden bells tinkled once again. The 7-colored auspicious clouds rolled and rocked, as 48 armored soldiers charged out whistling. Stepping on the clouds again, they turned into cold beams and charged towards immortal Xian Yang. This time, all the armored soldiers had the cultivation base of early-stage nascent soul realm. Immortal Xian Yang's face flickered slightly. Waving his hand casually, he unleashed a sheet of flame that burned all 48 early-stage nascent soul armored soldiers into tiny specks of light. In just the time of 2 breaths, the auspicious clouds rolled and rocked again, as 96 mid-stage nascent soul armored soldiers charged out from the clouds. Immortal Xian Yang was greatly alarmed. Strange, he cried out as he unleashed another sheet of flame that burned all the armored soldiers into nothingness. However, in just the time of 2 breaths, 192 late-stage nascent soul armored soldiers charged out from the clouds. Immortal Xian Yang's eyes went wide with astonishment. Waving his hand casually, he unleashed a flaming dragon that burned all the armored soldiers into a wisp of green smoke. After that, 384 early-stage nascent divinity cultivators teleported out from the auspicious clouds. The series of unforeseen events struck Wu Qi dumb. Only now did he realize that the chariot of 8 horses was indeed a supreme artifact of virtue that belonged to the ancient human emperor. Although he was able to control the chariot with a deceptive method, it contained endless profound secrets, and it was not something that could be mastered in a short period of time. 384 early-stage nascent divinity cultivators. Every muscle in Wu Qi's body was shivering. It was a magnificent sight. When facing against immortal Xian Yang, who possessed a cultivation base of heaven immortal realm, 384 early-stage nascent divinity armored soldiers could only struggle and struggle for 2 seconds, before their bodies exploded into countless specks of light that drifted down from the sky. However, killing so many early-stage nascent divinity armored soldiers with one strike had consumed quite a lot of immortal energies, and the expression on his face had turned extremely unsightly. Wu Qi stared blankly at immortal Xian Yang, laughed dryly and said, "Do you think there will be more people coming?" Immortal Xian Yang stared at Wu Qi. Immediately, he understood why Wu Qi asked such a question. What a lucky junior. You've obtained this supreme artifact, but you still don't know its function. If there are more people coming, doesn't that mean? While immortal Xian Yang's rebuke was still echoing in Wu Qi's ears, the surrounding auspicious clouds began to roll and tumble again. Without uttering a single word, 768 mid-stage nascent divinity armored soldiers materialized in the clouds, then charged towards Immortal Xian Yang amidst beams of cold light. Immortal Xian Yang's face turned pale with fright as he gave a loud cry. Without hesitation, he unleashed a red wheel of light, measuring 3 feet in diameter. 6 fist-sized red pearls were embedded in the wheel of light, glinting brilliantly. Right after he made his move, these pearls immediately sprayed out a large amount of green smoke and purple flame, which was accompanied by deafening thunderclaps. With just one strike, all 768 mid-stage nascent divinity armored soldiers were turned into nothingness. Immortal Xian Yang's face turned slightly pale. The strike had consumed quite a lot of his immortal energies and energy. However, the surrounding clouds suddenly rolled, and all of a sudden, 1,536 armored soldiers with the cultivation base of late-stage nascent divinity realm emerged from the clouds. These armored soldiers hovered midair, holding long halberds in their hands, then threw them forcefully towards Immortal Xian Yang. When these late-stage nascent divinity armored soldiers appeared, Wu Qi's vision suddenly turned dark. His divine will was consumed at an incredible speed, and in just a blink of an eye, his previously plentiful mental force was completely depleted, leaving only a tiny thread of mental force to keep him awake. A will was transmitted from the chariot of 8 horses. Suddenly, Wu Qi understood the origin of these armored soldiers. All of them were the protectors manifested from the enormous power of faith in the chariot of 8 horses. However, in order to utilize the power of faith in the chariot of 8 horses, they had to extract a tiny thread of Wu Qi's mental force and transform it into the soul core of these armored soldiers. Because of the restrictive formation, the strongest armored soldier that appeared could only have the same cultivation base as Wu Qi's nascent divinity. After absorbing the spirit, energy, and divinity of many nascent divinity cultivators, Wu Qi's nascent divinity had reached the level of a peak stage nascent divinity cultivator. Therefore, the protectors manifested by the chariot of 8 horses were all peak-stage nascent divinity armored soldiers. When these armored soldiers manifested, they extracted Wu Qi's mental force and transformed it into the soul core. As a result, Wu Qi's divine will was depleting at an incredible rate, and he nearly passed out due to the lack of energy. Wu Qi sighed lightly. If he had the cultivation base of a heaven immortal now, the enormous power of faith in the chariot of 8 horses would be able to manifest the protectors of heaven immortal realm, helping him to attack the enemies. But too bad, his cultivation base was not strong enough, and the peak stage nascent divinity armored soldiers could not pose any threat to Immortal Xian Yang. Immortal Xian Yang's face turned pale once again. He injected a great amount of immortal energy into the flaming wheel hovering above him, causing the 6 pearls to burst with a blinding red gleam. Large sheets of green smoke and purple flame wheeled around him, shattering the over 1,000 halberds that were shooting at him. Then, Immortal Xian Yang took a deep breath and sprayed out a large sheet of purple flame. Amidst the purple flame, 1,536 armored soldiers could only last for the time of one breath before they disintegrated. Wu Qi's face turned deathly pale, and cold sweat burst out from his body. Panting heavily, Immortal Xian Yang fixed his eyes on Wu Qi and said with a cold grin, "Junior, if this extraordinary treasure can summon heaven immortal armored soldiers." Suddenly, he took a few deep breaths, frowned and said, "What is this aroma that smells so good?" It is elegant and refined, a supreme grade incense." Wu Qi raised his hand up. A clump of drunken dragon incense, about the size of a human head, was burning fiercely in his palm. A faint green smoke drifted out from it, and the aroma had long enveloped an area of several tens of miles in circumference. As Immortal Xian Yang had exerted too much strength just now, he was gasping for air, and did not have the time to isolate the air with a restrictive spell. As a result, he had already inhaled a large amount of drunken dragon incense. After staring blankly at Wu Qi for a while, Immortal Xian Yang let out a loud cry. Suddenly, he fell from the sky like a rock. Hastily, Wu Qi reached out his hand and wrapped the flaming wheel with a clump of divine flame of order. After that, he grabbed the unconscious Immortal Xian Yang and shoved him into the spirit breeding ring. After putting away the chariot of 8 horses, Wu Qi gave the surroundings a glance. Just as he was about to leave this place, 7 to 8 black dots suddenly flew towards him at top speed from afar, while emanating an enormous immortal pressure that blotted the sky and blotted the earth. The immortal pressure of 7 to 8 heaven immortals merged into one, causing the entire Shui Yuan planet to tremble. Wu Qi's heart skipped a beat. So many heaven immortals. Chapter 333. The tremendous immortal pressure made all the living beings who had cultivated in Shui Yuan planet tremble, and dared not to move. Whether it was demon beasts, demon birds, demon fishes in the ocean, or the numerous cultivators on Shui Yuan planet, all the living beings who had cultivated in Shui Yuan planet could instinctively sense the pressure that came from everywhere. They all held their breaths with rapt attention, carefully retracting their auras. Under an iceberg near the original site of Snowflake City, 3 messy courtyards were placed in a row. Some cultivators were seen wheeling and patrolling in the sky on their flying swords, while others were seen going in and out of the courtyards, supervising a large number of mortal craftsmen to repair the dilapidated courtyards. These heaven immortals came from the few major clans in the other few major cities of Snowfield City. They were either related by marriage to those big clans, or some of the people in those big clans were their disciples. Therefore, when Immortal Chang Wu and his companions sent out the immortal orders, forcing Flying Snow City, Snowdrift City, and White Frost City to shut down their teleportation formations, sealing off all the entrances and exits of Shui Yuan planet, all the major clans used mystic arts to inform the heaven immortals they worshipped. Another old man, clad in a crimson robe and with a haggard face, said in a deep voice, "No matter why they sent out such an order, we need to find them first. How did Snowflake City end up like this? What should we do in the future? We need an explanation." All the heaven immortals hovering in midair began to talk again, allowing Wu Qi to hear them clearly. Raising his head in a reserved manner, Wu Qi said in a disapproving tone, "What's so strange about that? Since you dared to attack my father-in-law, you should have thought of the consequences. Lin Qiulua, your reliance has been captured alive. Today, I'm going to wipe out the entire Lin clan of Snowflake City right in front of you." Wu Qi sneered. From Black Dragon's spirit ring, he fished out 2 immortal talismans given by Patriarch Jiang Yun and gave them to Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu. When she saw Immortal Chang Wu and the other 2 heaven immortals lying limply on the ground, Lin Qiulua was so frightened that she screamed, "No, no! Immortal Monarch, seniors, what happened to you? Heavens! What's going on? What happened to you? What happened to you? Wake up!" An old Taoist wearing a grey Taoist robe with a black mountain embroidered on his chest snorted coldly and said, simply rude and unreasonable. Shui Yuan planet had been locked down for a few days. How much did it lose? This Shui Yuan planet does not belong to the 3 great clans of Snowflake City. Then, they would find Immortal Chang Wu and the other 2 heaven immortals and seize the opportunity to suppress them, preventing them from rebuilding Snowflake City. With the overall strength of the 8 heaven immortals, Immortal Chang Wu and the other 3 heaven immortals, who had joined forces for the sake of benefits, were no match for them at all. There was no need for them to consider their feelings. All they had to do was to force them to agree to merge the 3 major clans of Snowflake City with the other few cities. Lin Qiulua, with a pale face and naked body, was seen lying on the ground in a sorry state, looking around with a terrified expression. When Lin Qiulua saw the huge pit where Snowflake City used to be, and the 3 courtyards around it, she cried out in surprise, "This is Snowflake City. What are you doing here? What do you want?" Over the past 3 years, Wu Qi had concocted a large amount of drunken dragon incense in Myriad Immortals planet. This time, in order to deal with Immortal Chang Wu and the other 2 heaven immortals, he had spent 99% of the drunken dragon incense on them. As it was not a spirit medicine that could save lives and heal wounds, Wu Qi did not concoct too much of it, and he had almost wasted all of it today. After coming to a decision, they gave the surroundings a thorough examination, but they could not find the whereabouts of Immortal Chang Wu and the other 3 heaven immortals. Only then did they give up helplessly, continuing their search into the distance. On an icy peak less than 10 miles away from the iceberg, Wu Qi unleashed his sword beam. He gave the 3 courtyards a look, then turned to look at the huge pit next to them, where Snowflake City used to be. He could not help but grin coldly. A large sheet of white light burst out from the spirit breeding ring, amidst which came Yan Qijuan and his company. The 3 unconscious heaven immortals were lying on the ground in a sorry state, their faces flushed and snoring loudly. When they heard that Snowflake City was destroyed, and that immortal Chang Wu and the other 2 heaven immortals had sealed off Shui Yuan planet, these heaven immortals immediately rushed over like flies that smelled the scent of blood. It was just that their residences were either very far away from Shui Yuan planet, or they were busy with some matters that they could not attend to. Therefore, they only sneaked into Shui Yuan planet today and gathered together. They had just sensed the aura that erupted from the battle between Wu Qi and immortal Xian Yang, and they had come here hastily. But, they did not find anything valuable. 7 to 8 heaven immortals, old and young, beautiful and ugly, all dressed differently, were hovering midair. Their divine will kept scanning the surroundings, searching every inch of the snowfield within 10,000 miles circumference. Their divine will reached 100 miles deep into the snowfield. If not for Wu Qi's aura concealing mystic art that came from Scroll of Stealing, which allowed his aura to fuse with the heaven and earth, and turned him into a piece of Xian Bing, perhaps he would have long been captured by the combined divine will of these heaven immortals. Yan Qijuan, Xiong Wanling, and He Qianqiu were overjoyed when they heard the news, and a ferocious smile emerged on their faces. It was especially true for Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu, as they were used to being the overlords in the depths of Meng Mountains. Now that they had suffered a great loss in the hands of Lin Qiulua, it was needless to say how they were filled with hatred and resentment. The impulse to annihilate Lin clan had far surpassed their curiosity about how Wu Qi captured 3 heaven immortals alive. The 2 old demons were wild with joy. They took over the immortal talismans happily, then leaped into their demon clouds and brought up strong winds as they flew towards the courtyards of the 3 major clans in Snowflake City. Wu Qi had hidden immortal Chang Wu, vagabond Qing Yi, and immortal Xian Yang in a separate, small space. Therefore, Yan Qijuan and the others did not know that Wu Qi had already captured the 3 heaven immortals. When they saw the 3 heaven immortals, they were taken aback. Swoosh! Swoosh! The strong winds shook the surrounding snowfield, while large sheets of auspicious white clouds shot out from the 2 old demons' palms, smashing viciously towards the 3 courtyards. The gray-robed old Taoist exchanged a glance with the others, and all of them nodded their heads in agreement. This is not a good thing, and it is shameful. But, it should still be concocted in large quantities. Wu Qi thought to himself, also, the drunken dragon incense of the lowest grade has too great of a limitation when used. If they had cast a spell to isolate the poisonous gas and miasma beforehand, the incense would not be able to enter their bodies or touch their skin, and it would not be able to unleash its effect. If I can concoct an 8th or 7th grade drunken dragon incense, TSK. Since Snowflake City is destroyed, let it be destroyed. Since Snowflake City is destroyed, there is no need to rebuild it. Let it vanish forever. Every city in Snowflake City represented a great amount of benefits. With one less city, the other cities would be able to obtain more benefits. At least, those cultivators who came from outside the city would have no choice but to spend their money in the remaining cities. Changwu, Qingyi, and Xianyang. I have no idea what is wrong with them. Why did they seal off the 4 teleportation formations of Shui Yuan planet for no reason? What is the meaning of this? Are they the ones who have the final say in Shui Yuan planet? Even if Snowflake City is destroyed, the benefits of other cities must not be harmed. Yan Qijuan walked over and gave Lin Qiulua several dozens of slaps in a row. The slaps turned her face red and swollen, and blood trickled down from the corner of her mouth. Yan Qijuan snapped harshly, "Deposit? What deposit? Are you going to kill us as deposit? How dare you offend me? Every single one of you will be sentenced to death. 2 grand tutors, please take action and slaughter these people in front of you." Not only did they have to dismantle the remaining forces of the three major clans in Snowflake City, they were also required to cough up a huge sum of compensation. Only then would the 8 heaven immortals present here be satisfied. Otherwise, if they were to seal off Shui Yuan planet for a few days for no reason, just the number of cultivators going in and out of the Grand Universal Teleportation Formation every day, how many energy stones would they lose in toll fees? If they added up the losses of the 3 cities, it would be at least several 100,000 stones. Glancing around, Wu Qi scanned the surroundings instinctively with his divine will. After finding nothing that could stand in his way, he stepped on a sword beam and sped towards Snowflake City. When these heaven immortals had gone far away, only then Wu Qi carefully came out from Xianbing City. Standing on the snowfield and looking into the direction where these heaven immortals disappeared, Wu Qi sighed helplessly. He weighed the bag in his hand. There was not much drunken dragon incense left in it, so it was not enough to deal with these few heaven immortals. Yan Qijuan, Xiong Wanling, and He Qianqiu widened their eyes and glanced to the left and right, then suddenly turned to look at the 3 heaven immortals who were lying on the ground. The spirit breeding ring had a very large space inside, and according to Wu Qi's will, it could divide the living beings inside into different small spaces. Originally, the spirit breeding ring was a treasure used by cultivators to store their demon beasts. As demon beasts loved to fight, when they were stored in the ring, they had to be stored separately. Otherwise, they would definitely fight and kill each other, resulting in losses. Wu Qi was hiding under a xianbing as well. Exercising the mystic eyes of universe, he peered through the 10,000 feet thick xianbing and peered at the group of heaven immortals. After searching for some time, they failed to find any clues. However, they sensed an enormous aura of fire element energy lingering in the air, as well as a pure and powerful wave of willpower. The few heaven immortals gathered together and whispered to each other, then shook their heads. Lin Qiulua let out a miserable howl at the top of her voice. No, you can't. I'll return all the deposits. I'll apologize to you. I don't care what you do to me, you can't. While they were still a few miles away from the courtyards of the 3 clans, 2 old demons activated their spirit talismans at the same time. If there were several 100 kilograms of drunken dragon incense left, Wu Qi would really want to kill those 8 heaven immortals as well. He could casually set up some traps and ignite several 100 kilograms of drunken dragon incense, and it would be a piece of cake for him to kill 8 to 10 heaven immortals. After shouting and yelling for a while, it was the gray-robed old Taoist who first cried out, "Fellow immortals, let's not worry about that for now. We need to find Chang Wu and the other 2 first. What exactly is the purpose of this incident, and the cause and effect? They have to give us an explanation. Shui Yuan planet has been sealed for so many days for no reason. The 3 clans of Snowflake City must compensate the other cities for the loss." Shaking his head, Wu Qi licked his lips and began to fantasize that if he could concoct the first-grade sleeping incense recorded in Scroll of Stealing, it would be a powerful substance that could make even gold immortals, or even primordial immortals, drunk to death if they accidentally smelled it. But, the ingredients needed to concoct that sleeping incense. When Wu Qi thought of nearly 100 spirit herbs that were labeled as innate, he could not help but throw his head back and sigh. Chapter 334. On the day when Yan Qijuan and his 2 companions escaped from Snowflake City, all the men of sacrifice who accompanied them exploded their nascent souls. The entire Snowflake City was blown to smithereens, and only the courtyards of the 3 major clans survived the explosion, as they were protected by the immortal talismans given by immortal Chang Wu. After that, Lin Qiulua chased after Yan Qijuan and his companions, while immortal Chang Wu and the other 2 heaven immortals rushed to Shui Yuan planet and chased after Yan Qijuan. Because of that, the people from the 3 major clans had nothing to do, so they stayed under the ice mountain to repair their residences. However, the hearts of the people from the 3 families were wavering. None of them knew what was going on. The Drift Snow city was blasted into the sky for no reason at all. All the shops and inns in the city were blasted away, and the 3 clans suffered heavy losses. Apart from the clansmen who happened to be in the ancestral home at that time, the clansmen in the other cities were all killed. The chaos in the Drifts Now city this time was an incomparably heavy blow to the three clans. Three great clans had spent several tens of thousands of years on Shui Yuan planet, and only then did they manage to build up a small foundation like Snowflake City. Now, they hadn't even figured out what was going on, but Drifts Now city had been reduced to nothingness. Out of the 10 elites of their clan, no one would be able to accept this. The patriarch of the Lin family, Lin Qiansui, and the heads of the other two families, Lu Banian and Xian Ziren, were sitting in the main hall of the Lin family, looking at each other and sighing. The Drifts Now city was suddenly destroyed, the strength of the three clans suffered heavy losses. After that, the backers of the three clans, three heavenly immortal patriarchs, suddenly arrived. Without saying a word, they led their disciples out to hunt down Yan Qijuan and his men. Therefore, until now, they still had no idea what was going on, and why Snowflake City was destroyed. The patriarchs of the three clans were all at the mid-stage of the nascent soul realm. Lin Qiansui's cultivation was the highest, as he was about to break through to the late stage of the nascent soul realm. At this moment, Lin Qiansui was frowning and sighing in a low voice. The three immortal masters still haven't explained this matter clearly. Just what happened? Now that the Drifts Now city has been destroyed, flying snow, chaotic snow and white frost, I'm afraid they won't give us a chance to make a comeback. Lu Banian was silent for a while and said with a wry smile, we also have immortal master behind us, I'm afraid they won't dare. Xian Ziren could see it clearly. He smiled bitterly and said, for spirit stones, for benefits, why wouldn't I dare? When the three cities joined forces, there were 8 immortal masters behind them. Gathering the strength of 8 people to threaten the 3 immortal masters behind us, our future is bleak. Lin Qiansui stamped his feet and said angrily, but what exactly happened? Why were people suddenly fighting in the city? It was simply inexplicable, an undeserved calamity. The cultivation world had its own rules. How could he explode his nascent soul in a densely populated city? Moreover, there are so many of them using a secret formation to detonate their nascent souls. This is simply inexplicable and unreasonable. Lu Banian and Xian Ziren turned to look at Lin Qiansui at the same time and said together, Old Lin, is this related to your Qiu Luo? Lin Qiansui abruptly shut his mouth and did not say another word. Apparently, when Snowflake City was destroyed, they did sense her aura. As Lin Qiulua was fighting someone with all her might, it was impossible to fool her by telling her that it had nothing to do with her. Lin Qiansui was silent for a long time before he bitterly said, our 3 clans advance and retreat together. We are bound together for good or ill. If you have anything to say, wait until the 3 immortal masters return. Lu Banian and Xian Ziren exchanged a glance, then breathed out a heavy sigh at the same time. After that, their faces fell, as they transformed into 2 beams of bright light and shot up into the sky from the main hall. With great astonishment, they saw 2 balls of demonic clouds and wild winds approaching at top speed from a few miles away. They saw 2 balls of immortal light flashing amidst the demonic clouds, and the green gusts rolled up the white auspicious clouds. Like 2 waterfalls falling from the 9 heavens, they smashed down with deafening rumbles. The auspicious clouds and wild winds covered a huge area, covering an area of 100 miles in circumference around the 3 mansions. At the same time, a mighty immortal pressure was unleashed, causing Lin Qiansui and his companions to stiffen and be unable to move. Even the nascent soul patriarchs of the 3 clans were unable to move because of the immortal pressure, let alone the disciples of the 3 clans. In just a blink of an eye, the wild winds swept past the 3 mansions. This time, the patriarchs of the 3 clans did not have the time to activate their immortal talismans to protect their clansmen. The wild winds and the white clouds swirled around the 3 mansions at top speed, turning everything into powder wherever they went. With a hideous smile on their faces, Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu raised up their immortal talismans and aimed them at the patriarchs of the 3 clans. A few beams of cloud shot out and smashed heavily onto the chests of the 3 patriarchs. A force as heavy as a mountain shattered the defensive barrier they barely unleashed, shattering their breastbones. A flexible, vast, continuous, dense, and boundless strand of immortal force surged into their bodies, and it firmly sealed the vital blood in their entire bodies. It was as if countless balls of clouds had blocked up their meridians and blocked up their nascent souls, causing them to be unable to mobilize the slightest bit of magic energy. The original 3 residences had been turned into a clean snowfield, leaving nothing behind. The snowy plain within a circumference of 100 miles was as clear as a pale blue mirror, reflecting the sunlight with a bright and beautiful glow. Apart from the ice and snow, there was nothing left in this place. All the remaining clansmen of the 3 clans had been crushed into powder amidst the wild winds and white clouds. Evildoers. The 3 patriarchs stared fixedly at Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu, barely spitting out 2 words from their mouths. Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu put away the immortal talismans. They had only released less than 10% of the power of the talismans. Then, they carefully put them into their storage rings as if they were precious treasures. Since Wu Qi did not ask them to return the talismans, the 2 old demons had no choice but to swallow the 2 talismans, which were still filled with immortal energy. Carrying the 3 patriarchs, who were covered in blood and unable to move, Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu leaped onto the demon cloud and returned to the peak of the snowy mountain where Wu Qi and the others were. After throwing the 3 patriarchs to the ground, Xiong Wanling roared with laughter and said, "Hee hee, they are indeed immortal talismans crafted by heaven immortals. With just 2 immortal talismans, they have killed all their clans as easily as killing dogs." He Qianqiu chuckled and said, "That's right, the power of these immortal talismans is really impressive. But too bad, they can only be used once." Both of them were lying through their teeth, shamelessly telling Wu Qi that the 2 immortal talismans had consumed all their immortal energy. Helplessly, Wu Qi gave them a glare, then smiled and cupped his fist at Yan Qijuan. "Now, it's up to you how to vent your anger. You've been torturing this woman for the past few days. Did she give her a confession? Who paid her to kill these people? How did that man find her? Where did Lin Qiulua go to collect the money? Did she tell you anything about these things?" Yan Qijuan nodded slowly, then quickly sent a few words to Wu Qi through voice transmission. Wu Qi was struck dumb, then a cold smile emerged on his face. Taking a few steps back, Wu Qi spread his arms and pointed at Lin Qiulua and the 3 patriarchs. He smiled faintly, telling Yan Qijuan that he could take his revenge now. Without any hesitation, Yan Qijuan, Xiong Wanling, and He Qianqiu strode before the 3 patriarchs. Xiong Wanling stepped forcefully on Lu Bainian's head with his bare paw as he roared with laughter, "3 old dogs, do you know why you are facing the calamity of having your clans wiped out today?" He Qianqiu gave Xian Ziren a hard kick and said coolly, "Lin Qiulua has accepted someone's energy stones, and tried to kill us in the middle of the street in Snowflake City. She has killed over 100 of our disciples. We need to make her pay for this." With a complicated expression, the 3 patriarchs looked at Lin Qiulua, who was kneeling on the ground like a stone statue. Lin Qiansui threw his head back and breathed out a long sigh, then said in a deep voice, "Fellow Taoists, we're willing to repay all the losses we've suffered. We're willing to exchange all our properties for our lives." Xian Ziren coughed out a mouthful of blood and said with a hoarse voice, "Since it is Lin Qiulua who caused this calamity, it has nothing to do with us. After several tens of thousands of years of accumulation, we have 2 million upper-grade energy stones, and countless other rare treasures. I'm willing to offer them to you, fellow Taoists, in exchange for my life." Lu Bainian said the same thing. Coughing violently, he also said that he was willing to pay with the energy stones from his clan. Wu Qi gave the 3 patriarchs a look, shook his head, then spun and put immortal Chang Wu and the other 2 patriarchs into the spirit-breeding ring. After that, he descended the ice mountain, found an ice cave, and fell into a deep sleep. Paying with energy stones? If it were some other cultivators, they might have agreed to it. But, as Yan Qijuan and his companions were from Myriad Immortals planet, a mere several million upper-grade energy stones were nothing to them. Nevertheless, after several tens of thousands of years of accumulation, the three clans had only saved a few million upper-grade energy stones. They were really poor. The miserable howls and cries of Lin Qiulua and the patriarchs of the three clans kept echoing out from the peak of the snowy mountain, accompanied by the noises of bones breaking and flesh cracking. Wu Qi did not want to think about what kind of cruel torture they had gone through, as they had asked for it. With Yan Qijuan's temperament, and the bloodthirsty nature of Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu, it was not hard to imagine that the torture they were going through now might be even more terrifying than the 18 layers of hell. The miserable howls lasted for a full day and night, and only then did they stop. After a while, the three patriarchs, their bodies covered in blood, slowly walked down the ice mountain. Xiong Wanling, in particular, still had a great amount of blood, flesh, and bones hanging from the corner of his mouth. While walking, he kept burping. Obviously, one of the four men on the mountain had been swallowed alive by him. A demon king was indeed a demon king. When Wu Qi saw Xiong Wanling's refreshed appearance, he could not help but twitch his lips. Four men gathered together, and only then did Wu Qi say, according to the confession we obtained, after Lin Qiulua successfully completed the assassination, she would go to an inn in White Frost City and look for the person who sent her, and collect the rest of the reward. Therefore, we need to go to White Frost City now, and find out who is the person who sent her here. Xiong Wanling bared his teeth and said with a gloomy voice, no matter who sent her here, I've made them my sworn enemy this time. He Qianqiu just snorted coldly and did not say a word. Yan Qijuan's face turned even uglier, as he said coolly, you're right, we need to investigate this thoroughly. There are only a few people in Great Yan Dynasty who know my whereabouts. No matter who is scheming against me, we need to investigate this thoroughly. Wu Qi raised his head and gave Yan Qijuan a look, then nodded his head. Four beams of light shot up into the sky, flying straight towards White Frost City. Chapter 335. White Frost City was one of the four largest cities in Shui Yuan planet. Unlike Snowflake City, Flying Snow City, and Snowdrift City, White Frost City was dominated by only one clan. Bai clan, which had a history of several tens of thousands of years, had united with several dozens of other small clans and formed the ruling class of White Frost City. Bai clan had a large number of descendants, and most of them possessed excellent cultivation roots. On top of that, a female patriarch of Bai clan had successfully transcended her thunder tribulation 3,000 years ago and became a heaven immortal. She had even married an itinerant heaven immortal. Therefore, Bai clan was very influential. After all, compared to those heaven immortals who came from their own clan through marriage, master-disciple relationship, heaven immortals who came from their own clan were much closer, and would spare no effort in supporting and fostering their clan. For heaven immortals like immortal Chang Wu, for the sake of Lin Qiulua's clan, they might only use 30 to 50% of their strength. On the other hand, Bai clan had the absolute support of two heaven immortals. As a result, Bai clan was the strongest clan on Shui Yuan planet, and even among all the major clans in the four strongest cities, Bai clan was a supreme existence. Therefore, White Frost City had become the most orderly and well-organized city in Shui Yuan planet. Bai clan ruled everything in the city. All the laws were made by them, and everyone had to obey the rules set by them. Therefore, there were fewer disputes in White Frost City. When Wu Qi and his company arrived at White Frost City, it was noon. There were many cultivators going in and out of the city gate. Wu Qi noticed that all the cultivators who entered the city were required to show a waist medallion made of white jade at the gate. Without the medallion, Wu Qi and his company arrived at the city gate, which immediately attracted the attention of the guards. An old man with the cultivation base of Peak Jin Dan Realm strode forward, cupped his fist and bowed to Wu Qi with a big smile on his face. Fellow Taoists, is this your first time visiting White Frost City? Please cooperate with me and register your name here. The old man's attitude was amiable, his words were polite, and the smile on his face was warm. It reminded Wuqi of those professional greeters in front of the entertainment clubs back on Earth. Wuqi turned around and gave Yan Qijuan a glance. Yan Qijuan and his two brothers were curiously admiring the scenery of White Frost City, showing an attitude of letting Wuqi decide everything. Wuqi nodded and smiled at the old man, then followed him into a small hut built with ice blocks next to the city gate. Several men who looked like loose cultivators had just filled out a scroll, and then each of them received a white jade token. Wuqi noticed that after these rogue cultivators received the white jade token, they injected a trace of true essence into it, and the white jade token immediately emitted a faint white light, covering their bodies with a thin layer of halo. It seemed that this was the proof used by White Frost City to distinguish whether a cultivator had registered in front of the gate. Those with white light on their bodies were cultivators who had entered the city through the proper channels. Cultivators without white light on their bodies were cultivators who had used illegal means to invade, so they would naturally be interrogated and even hunted down. Wuqi walked into the house and came before a long table. A middle-aged man, who looked very amiable and enthusiastic, was sitting behind the table, writing something with a writing brush. When he saw Wuqi come in, the middle-aged man quickly rose to his feet, cupped his fist and bowed to Wuqi with a warm smile on his face, and said, "Fellow Taoist, may I know your name, and where are you from?" "I'm Bai Qi, the supervisor of this place. I hope fellow Taoist won't mind. This identity token is to ensure the safety of all fellow Taoists in the city." Yan Qijuan and his two brothers had also entered the house. After hearing Bai Qi's words, they nodded indifferently. Bai Qi and the old man gave Yan Qijuan and his two brothers a quick glance. When they realized that they could not see through their cultivation base, the expression on their faces became even more respectful. Bai Qi took out a silk scroll and handed it over to Wuqi. There were many columns on the scroll, stating the name, background, cultivation base, and so on. Wuqi pondered for a brief moment, then began to write quickly on the scroll with the writing brush. He made up 4 names, saying that they were itinerant cultivators from Thousand Waves Planet, and the purpose of their visit to Shui Yuan Planet was to purchase some special water element spirit herbs, as well as some ice and snow essence. As for their cultivation base, Wuqi did not hide it at all. 2 of them were Nascent Divinity Realm, 1 was Nascent Soul Realm, and 1 was Jin Dan Realm. Behind Wuqi's back was a shroud of dark mist, amidst which, a tiny sword could be vaguely seen. It was indeed the sign of a Jin Dan Realm cultivator. The cultivation base of 1 Nascent Soul Earth Immortal and 2 Nascent Divinity Half-Step Immortals was a little scary. Among all the patriarchs in Shui Yuan Planet, the strongest one only had the cultivation base of Peak Stage Nascent Soul Realm, and the female patriarch of Bai Clan 3,000 years ago was the only Heaven Immortal who was born and raised in Shui Yuan Planet for so many years. When they suddenly discovered that there were 2 nascent divinity cultivators among Wuqi's group, the attitude of Bai Qi and his company became even more respectful, and there was even a hint of fear in their eyes. Even though their clan was backed by a Heaven Immortal, having 2 nascent divinity cultivators was still a very scary thing. They possessed the power to destroy a city at will. Who would dare to show any carelessness or disrespect towards them? Bai Qi took out 4 pale golden jade medallions and handed them over to Wuqi respectfully. Looking at Wuqi, he smiled and said, "These are the VIP medallions of White Frost City. With them, seniors, you can enjoy a 30% discount on everything you spend in White Frost City, as long as you shop in Bai Clan's shops. This is a token of our appreciation, I hope seniors will accept it." Wuqi thanked Bai Qi with a smile. He took over the jade medallions and gave 1 to each of them. 4 of them injected a tiny thread of energy into the jade medallions. Immediately, the jade medallions glowed and shone with a faint golden gleam, forming into a tiny golden character on their clothes. After registering their identities, Wuqi and his company politely declined Bai Qi's suggestion of arranging a guide for them. The 4 of them walked straight into White Frost City. When Wuqi and his company had gone far away, Bai Qi quickly took out a golden crystal ball and cast an incantation gesture on it. He cast a spell on the crystal ball, and suddenly, the crystal ball spouted out 4 rays of strange light. One was a faint green gleam, weak and pure, one was a half-gray and half-white spirit gleam, gathering and dispersing like a cloud, one was a vast and vigorous dark mist, crashing and rocking crazily like a raging sea, and the last one was a strong green and white gleam, flying back and forth in the crystal ball like a crane flying in the sky. After carefully observing the 4 auras in the crystal ball, Bai Qi breathed out a sigh of relief. He turned to the clan members in the house and said, "Quickly inform Patriarch that 2 foreign nascent divinity seniors have entered White Frost City. Their cultivation techniques are half righteous and half evil, but they do not have much evil blood energy. Keep a respectful distance from them. Do not provoke them, and do not get too close to them." A member of the Bai family hurriedly responded and hurriedly ran into the city. Wu Qi turned and gave the city gate a glance. Through a mystic technique, he heard Bai Qi's order to his clan members. He pinched the medallion hidden under his sleeve and nodded inwardly. It seemed like this medallion could only be activated with energy, and after injecting energy into the medallion, it would leave behind an image of the energy in one of Bai Qi's treasures. Through the external characteristics of the image, Bai Qi would be able to identify the cultivation technique and disposition of the people who entered the city. If they were the kind of people who cultivated evil and fiendish cultivation techniques and killed people without blinking, Bai Qi would be able to alert them in advance. Sure enough, the reason why White Frost City could stand tall on Shui Yuan planet for several tens of thousands of years was because it had its own set of rules. However, no matter how they took precautions, as Wu Qi and his company did not come to White Frost City to stir up trouble, they did not have to worry about the reaction of Bai clan members. According to Lin Qiuluo's confession, the 4 of them walked along the widest main street in White Frost City for tens of miles, and finally came to the front door of a large inn, the White Frost Residence, which looked similar to Huixian abode in Flying Snow City. They exchanged a glance, and instead of entering the inn, they went to a wine shop opposite to White Frost Residence. They found a private room on the 6th floor of the highest floor and sat down. With a few words, Wu Qi dismissed the eager waiter, threw him 2 upper-grade energy stones, and asked him to pick some fine wine and dishes. When all the dishes were ready, Wu Qi closed the door of the private room, sat side by side with Yan Qijuan before the window, overlooking the people who were entering and exiting White Frost Residence with a cold gaze. Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu, the 2 old demons, were sitting at the table, eating and drinking to their heart's content. Their divine will had already enveloped the front door of White Frost Residence. Holding a jar of wine in his hand, Wu Qi sat before the window with his legs crossed. While overlooking the cultivators who were entering and exiting the front door, he said indifferently, "Lin Qiuluo said that the person is a girl, and she has 2 companions. Let's see if they are really staying in White Frost Residence, and if they will come out to do some activities." White Frost Residence occupied a very large area. Measuring nearly 5 miles in both width and length, the interior of the residence was a huge garden with mountains and rivers. Numerous exquisite pavilions and houses could be seen decorating the garden. Each pavilion and house was protected by a restrictive spell, and even Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu could not penetrate it with their divine will. As they could not confirm if the 3 people described by Lin Qiuluo were really staying in White Frost Residence, they could only use the stupidest method to wait for their prey to appear. He sat there from noon all the way until dusk. Suddenly, a few handsome men dressed in battle robes walked out of the White Frost house. The leader of the group had his arms around 2 beautiful teenage girls who only possessed the cultivation base of peak stage Hotian realm. They walked out of White Frost Residence while laughing and joking. When they stepped out from the door, they instinctively glanced to the left and right, their sharp eyes quickly glancing over every single passerby in the vicinity. Suddenly, the wine jar in Wu Qi's palm shattered into pieces. The wine turned into a wisp of hot air and spread out, filling the entire private room with a strong aroma of wine. Yan Qijuan turned to look at Wu Qi, lowered his voice and asked, "Do you know this man?" Wu Qi nodded slowly, then said in a low voice, "The Supreme General of Great Zhao, Zhao Qua." After a brief moment of silence, Wu Qi smiled and said, "He is Wu Qi's sworn brother." They once swore a deadly oath to work together and take care of each other. Yan Qijuan did not show any reaction to the first part of Wu Qi's words, but his face darkened a little. Abruptly, he heard the second part of Wu Qi's words. His wrist trembled, and the wine jar in his hand fell to the ground and shattered into pieces. He stared at Wu Qi in astonishment and cried out in a low voice, "He is your sworn brother. He is from Great Zhao. How could you swear an oath with him?" Wu Qi stared at Yan Qijuan in astonishment and said in a low voice, "Wu Qi forced him to swear an oath with my flying sword." Immediately, Wu Qi told Yan Qijuan the oath he used when he became sworn brothers with Zhao Kuo. Yan Qijuan did not say anything for a long while. He twitched his lips and shook his head. Wu Qi smiled, picked up a cold snow lotus seed from a cold plate on the table, and threw 2 of them towards Zhao Kuo. Zhao Kuo was taken aback. He raised his head abruptly, and a gleam flickered in his eyes. When the 2 snow lotus seeds were still about 70 to 80 feet away from him, they suddenly turned into wisps of green smoke. Wu Qi poked his head out and smiled at Zhao Kuo, then beckoned him over. Zhao Kuo's face fell instantly, as if he was a little girl who was about to go shopping in her new shoes, and suddenly stepped into a basket of dog poop. His face turned extremely unsightly. After dawdling for the time it took to finish a pot of tea, Zhao Kuo finally came alone to the private room where Wu Qi stayed. Upon entering the room, Zhao Kuo cupped his fist, bowed to Wu Qi and said, "Zhao Kuo offers greetings, elder brother. It has been 3 years since we last met. Are you still well, elder brother?" After a brief pause, Zhao Kuo straightened his back and said with a deep voice, "Elder brother, do you know that someone is trying to kill you? A few days ago, I've sent someone to White Cloud Planet to inform you. I wonder if elder brother has met the trusted subordinate sent by me?" Wu Qi was taken aback. Someone was trying to kill him. Chapter 336. Inside the private room, Wu Qi and the other 4 men were sitting quietly around the table. Holding a wine cup in his hand, Zhao Kuo slowly told them the reason why he came to Shui Yuan Planet. He had arrived 1 day earlier than Yan Qijuan, and had been hiding in White Frost residence, waiting for the right moment. The order he received was that if Lin Qiulua came to White Frost residence, he would find a way to establish a relationship with her. If she still did not come to White Frost residence after a certain period of time, he would find a way to establish a relationship with other major clans on Shui Yuan Planet. Yan Qijuan's face turned livid. The fact that he had personally brought a group of men to Shui Yuan Planet to plan an important matter was an absolute secret even within Great Yan Dynasty. The number of people who knew his whereabouts and the date of his departure was definitely less than 20. In fact, Zhao Kuo had arrived 1 day earlier than him, and was quietly waiting for the news of Yan Qijuan's assassination in White Frost residence. What did this mean? Someone in Great Yan Dynasty could not wait for Yan Qijuan to be killed, and it was even possible that someone from Great Yan Dynasty had directly intervened in the assassination. Wu Qi's face turned slightly unsightly as well. He fixed his gaze at Zhao Kuo and said with a cold grin, "So, who wants to kill me?" Zhao Kuo said in a deep voice, "I don't know who wants to kill you, but the order I received is that once the news of Yan Qijuan being killed in Shui Yuan Planet is spread out, you will definitely be the first person to come to Shui Yuan Planet. And, you will definitely be the first person to come to Shui Yuan Planet. I've brought a large number of Great Zhao's experts and sinecures with me. Once they find you, they will do everything they can to kill you." Wu Qi and Yan Qijuan exchanged a glance, and neither of them said a word for a long while. After a long moment of silence, Wu Qi said with a strange, cold smile, "How can they be so sure that I'll come to Shui Yuan Planet? How can they be so sure that I can come to Shui Yuan Planet?" Holding the wine cup in his hand, Zhao Kuo slowly admired the wine cup, which was made from White Frost City's special product. It was as thin as a cicada's wing, and there was a faintly discernible hexagonal snowflake pattern on its surface. He said indifferently, "Big brother, I don't know about the specific situation of other countries, but in Great Zhao's Zhaowu Palace, there are about 800 people who are responsible for collecting and investigating all information about you. Zhao Kuo raised his head and looked at Wu Qi, then said in a deep voice, "Big brother likes to wear clothes in light green, light blue, and light gray, and his underwear is usually made from the silk of moon-white heavenly worms." Big brother's favorite patterns on jade pendants were not the commonly used hornless dragons or Luan phoenixes, but the rarely used patterns of pine, bamboo, and plum blossoms. Big brother likes to drink the Thousand Flowers wine that Great Yen only serves to the imperial palace, and he likes to eat river fishes and seafood the most. He doesn't like meat like chicken and duck. Wu Qi's face turned pale. How was it possible that all these habits of his had been thoroughly investigated by someone? But, during the last 3 years, Wu Qi basically didn't notice anything. He carefully recalled all his actions during the last 3 years. He was either staying with Princess Zhanglu on Cloud Peak of White Cloud Planet, cultivating in seclusion in Star Picking City, and he had only visited Little Meng City 2 or 3 times. He had been living in seclusion, and yet, his habits had actually been thoroughly investigated by someone? Careless, too careless. For the last 3 years, relying on the backing of Patriarch Jiang Yun, he had been too careless. Cold sweat broke out from Wu Qi's back, wetting a large part of his clothes. Fortunately, he didn't do anything big during the last 3 years, or else, someone might have already found out about some of his dirty deeds. Fortunately, he didn't do anything during the last 3 years, or else, someone might have found out about some of his dirty deeds. Zhao Wu Palace, was this the intelligence agency of Great Zhao that was equivalent to scouting office? Yan Qijuan was struck dumb and speechless. Since Zhao Wu Palace knew so clearly about some of Wu Qi's private hobbies, it showed that they had already infiltrated into Great Yen dynasty. Someone close to Wu Qi must have been bribed and controlled by someone from Zhao Wu Palace. He couldn't help but feel a little suspicious, wondering if someone among his trusted subordinates had become Great Zhao's lackeys. Zhao Kuo continued, based on what elder brother has done after entering Great Yan's imperial court, and the habits of elder brother, Zhao Wu Palace has come to the conclusion, elder brother may look cold, but his heart is warm, and he values friendship and righteousness. Although his methods are ruthless, and sometimes even unscrupulous, they are only used against his enemies and outsiders. When it comes to those close to him, even if it costs him his life, he will still fight with all his might. After listening to Zhao Kuo's description of Zhao Wu Palace's analysis of Wu Qi, Yan Qijuan turned his head and stared at Wu Qi without blinking his eyes. On the other side, Wu Qi crossed his legs, held a wine cup in his hand, and said with a cold grin, "Am I really that good?" Fiddling with the wine cup in his hand, Zhao Kuo smiled and said, "Elder brother, haven't you arrived at Shui Yuan planet? And you even saved His Highness, the Crown Prince?" Yan Qijuan nodded thoughtfully, while Wu Qi did not say a word. He snorted coldly, narrowed his eyes, then took a sip from the wine cup and said, "Continue. How can they be so sure that I can come to Shui Yuan planet?" Zhao Kuo smiled, then lowered his voice and said, "Among the 6 dynasties, the first person who can come to Shui Yuan planet must be you, elder brother. 3 years ago, how did elder brother leave Myriad Immortals planet with that Jiangqing Zi, and how did you bring all the immortals from White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect to Myriad Immortals planet?" Zhao Kuo smiled and said, "At least according to the investigation conducted by Zhao Wu Palace in the last 3 years, the planetary ship that Jiangqing Zi used was seized by Han Shao Immortal. Planetary ships are extremely rare, and even White Cloud Immortal Sect only has a few of them. Therefore, it is impossible for elder brother and Jiangqing Zi to leave Myriad Immortals planet with a planetary ship, and bring all the immortals to Myriad Immortals planet in just a few hours." "Grand Universal Teleportation Formation?" asked Wu Qi with a cold snort. Zhao Kuo nodded and said with a smile, "Grand Universal Teleportation Formation. Zhao Wu Palace is sure of one thing, elder brother must have mastered the method to construct a Grand Universal Teleportation Formation, or he must have discovered a Grand Universal Teleportation Formation left behind in the ancient times. Therefore, elder brother will definitely come to Shui Yuan planet at the first possible moment." Wu Qi drummed his fingers on the wine table. He pondered for a while, then said with a frown, So, the decree you received says that if Lin Qiulua completes the mission smoothly, you will form a relationship with her. And if she fails, you will be asked to bring the men to complete the mission. Zhao Kuo nodded vigorously and said, His Excellency Su Dai has made a plan for this. If His Highness the Crown Prince is killed, everything will be fine. I will hook up with Lin Qiulua, promise her a handsome reward, and make her lean toward Great Zhao. Elder brother, if you come to Shui Yuan planet, I will ask Lin Qiulua to kill you. But, if Lin Qiulua fails, and fails to kill Great Yan's Crown Prince, according to her character, she will definitely seal off all the routes to and from Shui Yuan planet, and pursue His Highness the Crown Prince relentlessly. At that point in time, I will bring some men and cooperate with Lin Qiulua to hunt down His Highness the Crown Prince and you, elder brother. Wu Qi gave Yan Qijuan a look and said coldly, Who is trying to kill me? Do I have such a deep grudge against Great Zhao? Zhao Kuo narrowed his eyes and said with a smile, but Great Zhao's Prime Minister, His Excellency Lin Xiangru, said that the person who killed so many people in Sang'ao Immortal Abode, and left behind the name of His Excellency Lu Buwei, is you, elder brother. All the information Zhao Wu Palace has collected over the last 3 years proves that it is you who did this. Me? Wu Qi pointed at his own nose and cried out, Impossible. Zhao Kuo grinned, nodded at Yan Qijuan, and said, But, Zhao Wu Palace has investigated all the people who entered Sang'ao Immortal Abode. Apart from you, elder brother, who else could have the ability to do something like that and have the motive to do that? Who could travel freely in and out of Sang'ao Immortal Abode? Can I? Wu Qi narrowed his eyes and stared at Zhao Kuo. Zhao Kuo laughed complacently and said, Elder brother, what do you think? Who forced me to swear an oath of brotherhood that day? After that, elder brother, you were putting on a show in that small courtyard. Although I won't reveal what you have done, since the intelligence agencies of the 6 dynasties are now able to communicate with each other, after eliminating all the possibilities, the only one who could have stirred up trouble in Sang'ao Immortal Abode is you, elder brother. Clearing his throat, Wu Qi said helplessly, If that's the case, let's just assume that I did it. I killed Zhao Ling, and because of that, Great Zhao wants to seek revenge on me. That's why they sent my sworn brother to kill me. Zhao Kuo breathed out a long sigh and said, It is not only Zhao Ling elder brother, don't you know what you have done? Yan Qijuan interrupted, General Zhao Kuo, when you brought your men to Shui Yuan planet and contacted Lin Qiulua, are they your subordinates as well? Zhao Kuo shook his head hastily and said, No, the person who contacted Lin Qiulua beforehand is someone else, and he is definitely not someone from Great Zhao. Both of them are now in White Frost residence, but they don't know who we are. Therefore. While speaking, Zhao Kuo rose to his feet, pointed his finger outside the window and said, Look, they are the people who are walking out from White Frost residence. Wu Qi rose to his feet and saw a few men and women walking out from the residence. Obviously, they were from 2 groups of people. Among them was a girl clad in a tight black outfit. She was walking side by side with a young man, who was clad in a white crane cloak, looking handsome and elegant, and had a green medallion hanging on his waist. Both of them were greeting each other with a smile on their faces. Pointing his finger, Zhao Kuo said, That girl is the one who contacted Lin Qiulua directly. I have no idea who she is as well. But, that man is Bai Feng, the most outstanding disciple of the current generation of Bai clan in White Frost City. He has a cultivation base of mid-stage nascent soul realm, and is doted on by Patriarch Bai. He is in charge of the Frost Squad, which is used by Bai clan to maintain the security of White Frost City. He can deploy at least 3,000 well-trained cultivators. Yan Qijuan grinned coldly and said, So, they are sparing no effort. Are they trying to seduce the people from Bai clan, preparing to deploy the next wave of people to assassinate me? Meanwhile, Wu Qi was staring at the girl, his brows knitted into a tight frown as he said, I think I know her. Wu Qi did find the girl's face very familiar, and her bearing and graceful bearing were very familiar as well. He stared at the girl and pondered for a while, then cried out in astonishment, Damn it! She is one of the 3,000 lady officials in Star Picking City. And, she is the leader of one of them. I saw her when Bai Zhuer gave them the mission. I think her name is Yan. Yan Xiaoqi. The wine cup in his palm shattered abruptly. Suddenly, he saw someone from Star-Picking City in Shui Yuan Planet, and she was one of the more important officials in the city. On top of that, she was the one who was in charge of contacting Lin Qiulua, the one who bribed Lin Qiulua to assassinate Yan Qijuan. Upon seeing Yan Xiaoqi, Wu Qi could not help but feel bewildered as well. Yan Qijuan sprung to his feet. Of course, he knew the background of all 3,000 lady officials in Star-Picking City. They were all elite lady officials who were secretly trained by Great Yan Dynasty's imperial palace. Since they were young, they had received a brainwashing education. Once they acknowledged them as their master, they would never betray their master for the rest of their lives. They had acknowledged Wu Qi as their master, and had been helping Wu Qi to manage all the affairs in Star-Picking City. Wu Qi was their master, so how could they ever betray Wu Qi? Yan Qijuan, who was equally shocked, was about to say that Wu Qi had mistaken her for someone else, but his body suddenly turned stiff, and he was struck dumb. Behind Yan Xiaoqi, Yan Qijuan saw a familiar face. It was a young man with a fair face and no facial hair, with a delicate and pleasant appearance. Yan Qijuan knew this man very well. He was the chief eunuch of Yan Palace, Crown Prince's mansion, Ma He. Chapter 337. When Yan Qijuan revealed Ma He's identity, his face turned extremely unsightly. Great Yan's Crown Prince's mansion consisted of 3 main palaces, 9 auxiliary palaces, and 72 side palaces. Yan Palace was one of the 9 auxiliary palaces, where Yan Qijuan spent his days reading, writing essays, and managing documents such as correspondence. As the chief eunuch of Yan Palace, Ma He could be considered as one of Yan Qijuan's trusted subordinates. But now, he was standing right next to Yan Xiaoqi, and was the executor who paid Lin Qiulua to assassinate Yan Qijuan. What did this mean? He pressed both palms heavily on the windowsill, sinking 2 inches deep into it. With a gloomy voice, he said, "No matter who is behind this, I swear I'll kill them." Abruptly, Yan Qijuan turned to look at Zhao Kuo and said coldly, "Don't you know anything about their identities?" Zhao Kuo shook his head helplessly and said in a deep voice, "Zhao Kuo belongs to Great Zhao's military ministry, which is a completely different system from Zhao Wu Palace. Zhao Wu Palace is controlled by Prime Minister Lin Xiangru and Acting Prime Minister Su. The military ministry is just cooperating with Zhao Wu Palace, and Zhao Kuo is just acting under the imperial decree." Wu Qi pondered for a brief moment, then a murderous look suddenly flashed across his face. Grinning coldly, he said, "Who cares? Imperial Advisor Xiong, Imperial Advisor He, go and capture them. Yan Xiaoqi, Ma He, and the people around them, capture them alive, bring them out and interrogate them." "No!" cried Zhao Kuo hastily. "I've brought 3 sinecures from Great Zhao with me this time, and they are also." Zhao Kuo gave Xiong Wanling and He Qianxiu a quick glance, indicating that the 3 sinecures he brought were also nascent divinity realm cultivators. Wu Qi knitted his brows into a tight frown. After a brief moment of pondering, he squeezed all the remaining drunken dragon incense into a ball the size of a toddler's fist, then gave it to Zhao Kuo together with an antidote. He lowered his voice and whispered something into Zhao Kuo's ears. Instantly, Zhao Kuo's expression flickered, and he turned to look at Wu Qi with a troubled expression. Wu Qi wanted Zhao Kuo to use the drunken dragon incense, so that when Wu Qi made his move later and the sinecures of Great Zhao tried to stop him, he would use the incense to kill all 3 sinecures. Naturally, Zhao Kuo was unwilling to accept Wu Qi's request. He had brought 3 nascent divinity sinecures with him. If anything happened to them on Shui Yuan Planet, Zhao Kuo would not be able to explain himself when he returned. The primordial spirit worshippers were a strategic force in the Great Zhao. Losing even one of them was a big deal, let alone losing 3 of them at once. Glaring fiercely at Zhao Kuo, Wu Qi frowned and pulled out the 3 green jade rings he looted from vagabond Qing Yi. Handing the rings over to Zhao Kuo, Wu Qi grinned coldly and said, "These 3 jade rings are immortal items. A set of 3 immortal items for 3 nascent divinity cultivators. Do as you see fit. Either you knock them out and hand them over to me, or..." With a sway of Wu Qi's body, 2 celestial fiend puppets sprung out from Wu Qi's body like ghosts. Without making a sound, they clamped Zhao Kuo from both sides, while 2 razor-sharp swords pressed against Zhao Kuo's ribs from both sides. With a charming smile on his face, Wu Qi looked at Zhao Kuo and said gently, "You are my sworn brother. Brother, you are my sworn brother. For the sake of your brother, I wonder if you are willing to sacrifice yourself for me?" As Wu Qi chuckled, the 2 celestial fiend puppets exerted force on their wrists and thrust their swords 3 inches into Zhao Kuo's ribs. A faint blood-red gleam shone from the puppets' bodies, as Zhao Kuo's blood essence was slowly sucked away by the swords. Zhao Kuo's expression flickered slightly. With a smile on his face, he cupped his fist at Wu Qi and said, "Since elder brother has said so, why don't I let you handle these 3 mere sinecures?" After receiving the ball of drunken dragon incense and 3 jade rings, Zhao Kuo smiled wryly as he looked at the 2 celestial fiend puppets who were clamping him. Wu Qi snorted coldly. The 2 celestial fiend puppets wiggled and wiggled, then slowly transformed into 2 extremely beautiful teenage girls with a heavenly fragrance. With a cold and indifferent face, the teenage girl gave Zhao Kuo's ribs a vicious punch, hitting right on the wound. Zhao Kuo howled in pain. He gave Wu Qi a piteous look, then breathed out a long sigh helplessly and said, "Since you are going to deal with 3 sinecures, you might as well kill my assistant as well. That assistant is Zhao Ta's trusted subordinate, and the reason he came out with me this time is to fight for the credit." Wu Qi nodded and agreed to Zhao Kuo's request. With a bitter face, Zhao Kuo changed into clean clothes and cleaned up his wounds, then brought the 2 celestial fiend puppets and walked out of the tavern. Wu Qi gave Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu a look. Grinning coldly, the 2 demon kings transformed into 2 clumps of demon wind and rushed out of the window, leaping down towards Yan Xiaoqi and her company on the street. It seemed that Yan Xiaoqi, Ma He, Bai Feng, and their company were coming to this tavern as well. When Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu leaped down, they had just arrived at the entrance of the tavern. All of a sudden, Bai Feng heard a strong gust of wind coming from above, and a strong demonic aura gushing down from above. He could not help but bellow furiously, "Who are you? How dare you cause trouble in White Frost City?" With a wave of his hand, a dozen pale blue sword beams, each about 10 feet long and enshrouded in a dense white mist, shot out and greeted Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu. These sword beams were made by the Heaven Immortal Patriarch of White Frost City, using the essence of Xianbing from the deep ocean, combined with 10,000 years old Xianbing iron, and tempered with the power of the stars. They were called Frost Star Swords. The sword beams were extremely cold, and if an ordinary Jin Dan realm human immortal was struck by them, they would definitely be frozen into ice cubes, and those with slightly weaker cultivation base might even be frozen to death. As the most outstanding disciple of this generation of Bai clan, Bai Feng was given a total of 13 Frost Star Swords. When the 13 sword beams were unleashed at the same time, they produced an incredibly powerful force. The cold air swept out whistling and quickly spread to an area of 1,000 feet in circumference. In an instant, a thick layer of ice was formed on the ground. All the cultivators in the vicinity shuddered and hastily fled in all directions. Even those low-grade cultivators who were having their meals in the tavern were screaming and fleeing in panic. A few of them who were slightly slower were turned into white ice statues by the cold air unleashed by the Frost Star Swords. Cries of surprise could be heard coming from afar, as if someone was laughing and shouting, "Where did these itinerant cultivators come from? How dare they cause trouble in White Frost City? Aren't they courting death?" Xiong Wanling snorted coldly as he dove down. He overlapped his palms and pressed them down forcefully. An enormous palm shot whistling out from his palms and smashed viciously against the Frost Star Swords. Bai Feng felt a dreadful, irresistible pressure smashing down from the top of his head. His knees turned soft, and he fell to his knees. At the same time, all his internal organs felt a tremendous pressure, and he coughed out a mouthful of blood from his stomach. Instantly, the ground was stained with his blood. After being struck by Xiong Wanling's palms, the Frost Star swords immediately produced a series of cracking noises. Large cracks appeared on the body of the swords, and the cold air was shattered by Xiong Wanling with a single strike. As his flying swords were damaged, Bai Feng, whose fleshly body was already severely wounded, felt his vision turn dark, and his divine sense was severely wounded as well. Streams of blood shot out from all 7 apertures of his, and he fell to the ground in a sorry state. His body twitched, and he did not even have the strength to rise to his feet. The enormous palm of light unleashed by Xiong Wanling had smashed the Frost Star swords and smashed viciously onto the ground. A loud boom rang out, and a ring of blinding light that could be seen with naked eyes spread out in all directions. A tremendous force shook and shattered the ground tens of miles in circumference. Many cultivators howled miserably as they were rolled up by the shock wave and thrown backward. Their bodies suffered a tremendous impact, and some cultivators with weaker cultivation base were ripped to shreds by the shockwave. Large sheets of blood mist sprayed and dispersed in the air. He Qianqiu let out a long cry, opened his mouth, and sprayed out a large sheet of green light rain. Soon, countless green raindrops covered the sky and the earth. The cultivators of Bai clan, who had a green jade medallion hanging on their waist and represented the identity of the Frost team of White Frost City, were struck by the raindrops. Their frail bodies were pierced through by the raindrops, and in just a blink of an eye, they were riddled with holes. The Jin Dan in their bodies were shattered by the raindrops, and their souls were turned into wisps of green smoke that drifted away in the air. The 2 demon kings were used to running wild in Meng Mountains. Whenever they struck, they would strike with a deadly strike. They did not care that this place was White Frost City, or the birthplace of some heaven immortal patriarch. Xiong Wanling had crushed half of White Frost City with one palm strike, while He Qianqiu had killed over 20 members of the Frost team of White Frost City, including Bai Feng, the most outstanding disciple of the current generation of Bai clan. Now, the only people still standing on the street were Yan Xiaoqi, Ma He, and the other 2 men and 2 women, with pale faces. All 6 of them had their eyes wide with terror, staring at Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu, who were leaping down from above. They knew these 2 imperial advisors of Great Yan dynasty, and they knew who they were. They also knew that they were Yan Qijuan's personal guards on this trip to Shuiyuan planet. Since the 2 demon kings were here, what about Yan Qijuan? He Qianqiu let out a long and sonorous cry. He flicked his sleeve and shot out a beam of green light. Without being able to resist, Yan Xiaoqi and the other 5 men had their souls, 7 apertures, and cultivation base sealed by the green light. A breeze blew across, and as He Qianqiu flung his sleeve, all 6 men were shoved into it. As Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu were about to return to the inn and meet up with Wu Qi and Yan Qijuan, 3 powerful demon energies suddenly towered into the sky. 3 nascent divinity sinecures of Great Zhao were rushing towards them from the west. One of them cried out sternly, "Are you fellow Daoist Xiong and fellow Daoist He? Come, let's get to know each other better." Although these 3 sinecures were demon beasts, they were emanating a towering killing intent from their bodies. When they were still a few miles away, the 3 sinecures raised their arms and waved their hands, unleashing 3 sword beams that came flying towards them. Then, one of the sinecures let out a loud roar. Suddenly, a long flagpole made of white bones poked out from above his head, and a large flag made of human skin was hanging on the flagpole, spinning rapidly in the sky amidst green smoke and phosphorescence. Right at this moment, Zhao Kuo dashed out from a collapsed building, with a long wound on his forehead that was bleeding profusely. Waving his arms and legs, he rushed towards the 3 sinecures, together with 2 pretty girls. Green smoke was coiling around Zhao Kuo's body, and a delicate fragrance was wafting in the air. He rushed before the 3 sinecures and cried out with a stern voice, "Sinecures, help!" Why did the building collapse all of a sudden? Without hesitation, the 3 sinecures pulled Zhao Kuo behind their backs and protected him tightly. Zhao Kuo threw a ball of herbs that kept emitting green smoke next to the feet of the three sinecures. In the other room, as Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu were about to fight, the three sinecures' bodies suddenly swayed and fell limply to the ground. The sword beams and the flagpole they unleashed lost their control, hovering weakly in the air and losing the mighty momentum they had a moment ago. Wu Qi gave a loud laugh, and together with Yan Qijuan, he leaped towards them. Yan Qijuan's face was filled with an excited smile, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. All of a sudden, ear-piercing noises of wind breaking could be heard coming from all directions of White Frost City. Countless sword beams were approaching, and shrill sirens were ringing through the sky. Chapter 338. Paying no heed to the cultivators who were rushing towards them from all directions, Wu Qi sprung to Zhao Kuo's side. 99 primordial runes shot out, glowing with a purple-gold light as they smashed into the forehead, chest, dantian, and other vital parts of the three nascent divinity sinecures, completely sealing off the flow of their energies. When the primordial runes entered the bodies of the three nascent divinity sinecures, like tiny seeds, they began to rapidly extract their blood essence, energies, and the natural energies from the surroundings, growing and expanding at an incredible speed. Visible to naked eyes, purple gold runes began to spread on the skin of the three nascent divinity demon kings, quickly transforming into a large purple gold net that tightly enveloped their bodies. Looking at what Wu Qi was doing, Zhao Kuo's heart skipped a beat. As the chief general of Great Zhao, he could naturally recognize Wu Qi's technique of the Tao of primordial runes, which came from the same origin as the special techniques of Daqin and Su Fu. Zhao Kuo took a deep breath, and his opinion of Wu Qi's overall strength rose. At the same time, a deep sense of helplessness rose from all over his body. How many trump cards did Wu Qi still have? Was there any chance for him to break free from Wu Qi's control? Laughing bitterly, Zhao Kuo suddenly threw his head back and let out a sharp howl. His howl rose and fell, and the tone of his voice changed very quickly. Through the howl, Zhao Kuo told all his subordinates in White Frost City to leave the city and rendezvous in a snowfield 300 miles east of the city. At the same time, several thousand cultivators of White Frost City, clad in white robes, had gathered around them. All of them were staring at Wu Qi and his company with hostile eyes. However, perhaps it was because the person in charge had not shown up yet, although they had surrounded Wu Qi and his company, none of them had struck yet. They had only formed a formation, trapping Wu Qi and his company in the center. Grinning coldly, Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu came to Wu Qi's side, standing on both sides of Wu Qi and Yan Qijuan to protect them. Zhao Kuo helplessly looked at the two demon kings, who did not pay any attention to him. He murmured in a low voice, "I've uncovered their scheme, and I deserve the credit as well. What's more, I even helped you capture 3 primordial divinity adepts alive." With a smile on his face, he forced his way to Wu Qi's side and forced himself to stay in Xiong Wanling's protective circle. From afar, a snowy cloud was flying towards them at high speed. 3 old men with white hair and silver beards waving in front of their chests trod on the cloud and arrived in front of Wu Qi and his friends. Among the 3 old men, the 2 on the left and right were at the middle and late nascent soul stage respectively, while the old man in the middle was at the early nascent soul stage. Perhaps, relying on his cultivation base of early nascent divinity stage, the old man in the middle thought he could do whatever he wanted in Shui Yuan planet. From a great distance away, the old man in the middle released his divine will and scanned Wu Qi and his company. When he found out that Wu Qi's cultivation base was merely at the Jin Dan realm, he snorted disdainfully. The cold snort shook the entire White Frost City. When he found out that Yan Qijuan's cultivation base was merely at the early nascent soul stage, he snorted disdainfully as well. However, when he scanned Zhao Kuo and his company with his divine will, he realized that he could not see through the cultivation base of Zhao Kuo, Xiong Wanling, and He Qianqiu. Immediately, he retracted the cold snort that was swirling in his nostrils. The old man's face turned very unsightly as he glared at Wu Qi. Stepping onto the snowy cloud, he cupped his fist and bowed slowly. "Fellow Taoists, please give me an explanation. Why did you destroy the foundation of White Frost City, and why did you kill the disciples of Bai Clan? Bai Feng's dead body was lying on the ground. His body was riddled with holes like a sieve, and many parts of his body were broken, making him look like a human. Wu Qi cleared his throat, clasped his hands behind his back, and took a step back. In his opinion, White Frost City was a power that followed strict rules. Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu were too merciless in their attacks. They had destroyed such a large city and killed so many disciples of Bai Clan. If they wanted an explanation, Yan Qijuan should be the one to talk to them. If they started a fight because of a disagreement, Wu Qi would have no choice but to retreat. After all, he was in the wrong. How could he destroy their foundation, kill their disciples, and wipe out their entire clan? It was true that Wu Qi was a cruel and merciless man, but that was only when he was dealing with his enemies. Apart from that, he was a very reasonable man. Now that he was in the wrong, Wu Qi had chosen to retreat. Lightly pulling Yan Qijuan's sleeve, Wu Qi said in a low voice, "We were in the wrong first. If we really can't do it, let's just give them some compensation." Yan Qijuan's facial muscles twitched. He gave Wu Qi a look, then slowly nodded his head. Through this incident, the fact that Wu Qi could come to Shui Yuan planet at the first possible moment to rescue him, and even managed to save him from the joint pursuit of 3 heaven immortals had shocked Yan Qijuan, and at the same time, he sighed with mixed emotions in his heart. It seemed like this son-in-law of his was really a good man. At least, he enjoyed this filial piety very much. And, the overall strength Wu Qi had shown had even made Yan Qijuan gasp in amazement. No matter what method he used to capture 3 heaven immortals alive, he had captured 3 heaven immortals alive. Having a son-in-law like this made Yan Qijuan feel very good, unprecedentedly good. Therefore, no matter how he looked at Wu Qi now, Wu Qi's opinion naturally carried a great weight, and was worthy of being taken seriously by him. Striding forward, Yan Qijuan cupped his fist and bowed to the 3 old men. "Seniors, Junior Yan Qijuan offers greetings." It would have been better if he did not mention his name, but as soon as he did, the 3 old men's faces fell instantly, and Chi-Chi's face fell instantly. The old man with early-stage nascent divinity cultivation base among them cried out sternly, "Yan Qijuan? Could the people beside you be Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu? Well, we were just about to send out some men to hunt you down, and you actually came knocking on our door? Ha, you are seeking your own death." Another old man scolded with a loud voice, "Where is Miss Yan, Yan Xiaoqi? Hand them over now. She promised us that as long as we can capture and kill you, she will give us 20 million pieces of upper-grade energy stones. Hand them over now, and I'll let you die in one piece." The last old man cried out straightforwardly, "My boys, surround them quickly. Don't let them escape. Send an urgent message to Patriarch, asking him and fellow immortals to come to White Frost City as soon as possible, and tell them that the mastermind is surrounded by us." The faces of Wu Qi, Yan Qijuan, and the others fell instantly. No wonder Yan Xiaoqi and Bai Feng were together. In just a few days, Yan Xiaoqi had even bribed the people of Bai Clan. Using energy stones to open a path for these cultivators who were not from Myriad Immortals planet was indeed a method that worked every time. How could Bai Clan not care about right or wrong, and just wanted to kill them? Wu Qi snorted coldly, then casually fished out a thick handful of explosive talismans and threw them out in all directions. He injected his energy into them, and at least 2,000 of them were wrapped in a thin layer of bright light, shooting out in all directions like arrows. The surrounding disciples of Bai Clan were thrown into chaos. Thousands of sword beams shot down in a disorderly manner, aiming at those explosive talismans, trying to stop them. But, Wu Qi was very fast. Before the 3 old men could finish their words, he had already fished out a large handful of explosive talismans and threw them out in all directions. Although several thousand sword beams shot down, they only managed to stop less than 300 explosive talismans, while the rest of the talismans had already shot out to every corner of White Frost City, crashing into many buildings and houses. For a moment, the sound of explosions filled the air, and countless balls of flame rose from all directions. Many buildings and houses collapsed amidst the raging flames, and the sky was filled with broken bricks and tiles that flew everywhere. Wu Qi let out a wild laugh and said, "Let the two imperial advisors lead the way. Let's break out of here." Another few thousand explosive talismans were thrown out, and White Frost City was once again engulfed in flames. Another large number of buildings were destroyed by Wu Qi. The surrounding disciples of Bai clan roared furiously at the same time, while all kinds of low-grade magical treasures came smashing down towards them like a storm. Wu Qi laughed wildly. With a shake of his left wrist, countless golden specks burst out from the earth element dragon scale shield. The palm-sized golden specks shot out in all directions with ear-splitting whistling noises, clashing with the sword beams and low-grade magical treasures that blotted the sky. This time, a faint layer of white immortal light could be seen amidst the yellow energy barrier, and a layer of faint immortal runes could be seen. It was the transformation that happened after the earth element dragon scale shield devoured Lin Qiuluo's immortal armor, and its defensive strength had become even stronger. The razor-sharp dragon scales and the heavy earth element energy essence. When both of them were combined, the power unleashed was extremely frightening. It was a pity for the many disciples of Bai clan in White Frost City. The strongest weapons they used were merely mid-grade magical items and flying swords. Wherever the golden dragon scales passed, the flying swords were broken, and the magical items were torn apart. It was like a sharp knife cutting a piece of tofu. The golden light streaked across the sky, leaving behind countless explosions. Several thousand disciples of Bai clan coughed out blood. Their flying swords and magical treasures were destroyed, and their minds were severely wounded. The three patriarchs were trembling with rage, but their eyes were filled with greed. They shouted sternly, "Little thief, how dare you? Get into formation and surround them. Hold on for the time it takes to finish a pot of tea, and patriarchs and immortal masters will be here in no time." Before their words could fade away, Xiong Wanling had transformed into a 50 feet tall black bear. He threw his head back and let out a long roar into the sky, while all the black hair on his body stood up, each measuring nearly 3 feet long. As Xiong Wanling let out a shrill howl, the hundreds of thousands of black hairs on his body suddenly flew out along with wisps of dazzling black light. Followed by a silvery puffing noise, Xiong Wanling turned into a naked bear, without even a single hair on his eyebrows. Along with ear-piercing swishing noises and tens of meters-long beams of black light, his hundreds of thousands of body hairs shot across the sky like arrows shot from a powerful bow, along with shrill swishing noises. Apart from the three patriarchs who had the cultivation base of nascent soul realm and above, the strongest among the several thousand disciples of Bai clan was merely at the peak of Jin Dan realm. Facing the desperate attack launched by Xiong Wanling with all his black hair, several thousand disciples of Bai clan howled and fell to the ground while coughing blood. Wherever the black hairs passed, everything was pierced through. Numerous head-sized holes appeared on the bodies of the Bai clan's disciples. Some of them were pierced by more than a dozen black hairs, and their bodies were shattered. Clearly, they no longer had any signs of life. A crane cry rang out, as He Qianqiu had transformed back to his true form. With a powerful flap of his several tens of feet long wings, countless beams of green light shot out from his body, turning into a rain of green light that smashed towards the three patriarchs. The three patriarchs cried out in alarm. How could they have the courage to fight head-on with He Qianqiu? The strongest patriarch in the middle produced an immortal talisman to protect himself, while the three of them fled to the back in a sorry state. All of a sudden, an enormous immortal pressure came sweeping towards him. Wu Qi quickly turned his head over his shoulder, and he saw 8 black dots appear out of nowhere several hundred miles away. Wu Qi gave a loud cry as he grabbed Yan Qijuan and Zhao Kuo, called out to them, then transformed into a black beam and fled at top speed. Chapter 339. How dare you! Right after Wu Qi brought Yan Qijuan and Zhao Kuo up into the sky, a beautiful lady among the 8 heaven immortals who came chasing after them had already let out a loud cry. With a blink of her body, she arrived behind Wu Qi. With just a thought, a heaven immortal could teleport to another place with his divine will. His speed was so fast that it was simply indescribable. Even if 10 peak stage nascent divinity cultivators tied together, their teleportation speed could not catch up with a heaven immortal. The lady looked down at the dilapidated White Frost City, where dark smoke billowed out from every corner of the city, and sensed the wisp of Yin energy left behind by the several thousand Bai clan members before their tragic deaths. Her beautiful eyes were filled with blood, and her eyeballs nearly popped out from their sockets. With a teleportation, she arrived behind Wu Qi. Without saying a word, she stretched out her hand and grabbed towards Wu Qi. "How dare you destroy the 10,000 years of foundation of Bai clan?" This lady immortal was the patriarch of Bai clan, Bai Qingshuang, who successfully transcended her thunder tribulation 3,000 years ago and became a heaven immortal. Currently, all the members of Bai clan were her descendants. Witnessing several thousand of her descendants being slaughtered like chickens, Bai Qingshuang felt a heartache that made her heart, liver, and lungs tremble. With another teleportation, she arrived behind Wu Qi. Her 5 fingers shone with a golden gleam as she cast a restrictive spell and grabbed towards Wu Qi. Once the restrictive spell was cast, the air around Wu Qi suddenly froze. He was like a fly trapped in amber. Even with his cultivation base, he could no longer move even a little bit. The dark beam transformed from the acquired magnetic sword beam twisted and vibrated in the air, producing muffled buzzing noises, yet it just could not move an inch forward. Bai Qingshuang growled ferociously as she grabbed Wu Qi's left shoulder with one hand. Her slender and beautiful fingers clenched down hard. Even though Wu Qi's body was tempered by the dragon transformation script and a great amount of dragon blood essence, it was still crushed into pieces by this frail-looking Bai Qingshuang. The bones and meridians in Wu Qi's left shoulder exploded into a ball of meat paste, while his left arm, which was holding Yan Qijuan, was nearly severed from his body. Wu Qi let out a miserable howl. He turned his head and glared at Bai Qingshuang, then roared at the top of his voice, "Divine flame of order, explode." In Wu Qi's spiritual ocean, on top of the phoenix fire pouch, the divine flame of order, which had grown to nearly 10 feet tall and as thick as an arm after absorbing the innate energies of 5 elements from Wu Qi's body, transformed into a clump of purple and green flame and burst out from the wound on Wu Qi's shoulder. A large amount of purple and green light shot up into the sky, followed by Qingshuang's little hand, and burned her body. Wherever the divine flame of order swept across, Bai Qingshuang's body was quickly set ablaze like a dried straw. Her fair and plump arm was burned into ashes on the spot, with golden fat dripping down ceaselessly. Bai Qingshuang shrieked in pain, "Innate divine fire, who are you?" While howling in pain, Bai Qingshuang spun and fled, returning to the side of the other 7 heaven immortals in just a blink of an eye. But, as an innate divine flame, how could the divine flame of order be so easy to deal with? She fled with teleportation, but the divine flame of order followed her closely like maggots on a bone. It broke through the void and clung tightly to her body, chasing after her. The purple and green flame wrapped around Bai Qingshuang and burned her violently, turning her immortal body into ashes in just a blink of an eye. Only a golden nascent divinity managed to escape from her body in a sorry state. Not allowing her nascent divinity to escape far, the divine flame of order wheeled around and coiled around her nascent divinity. Bai Qingshuang shrieked miserably with fear, while the other 7 heaven immortals behind her also struck at the same time, unleashing all sorts of restrictive spells from Qi, forcibly locking down the void in that area. The divine flame of order trembled, then suddenly vanished into thin air. Only then did Bai Qingshuang's nascent divinity breathe out a sigh of relief, fleeing back into the arms of a handsome young man. Blood sprayed out from Wu Qi's 7 apertures. With his current cultivation base, even though he had an extraordinary treasure like the phoenix fire pouch, it was still not enough for him to freely control the divine flame of order to attack the enemy. However, as he had managed to communicate with the divine flame of order telepathically, he had not hesitated to use the source energy of his nascent divinity to barely control the flame and injure Bai Qingxuang with one strike. Although he had forcibly fused 30% of his nascent divinity power into the divine flame of order to launch a desperate attack, although the 30% of his nascent divinity power was devoured and digested by the divine flame of order, 99% of the divine flame of order had burst out of his body and was no longer under Wu Qi's control. The restrictive spells unleashed by those heaven immortals had locked down the void, but they could not stop the unusual movement of the divine flame of order. After devouring 30% of the power of Wu Qi's nascent divinity and burning away Bai Qingxuang's immortal body, the divine flame of order broke through the void and disappeared. No one knew where it went. Sensing that his nascent divinity had suddenly weakened by 30%, as well as the divine flame of order that was left on the phoenix fire pouch, Wu Qi felt like weeping but had no tears. Currently, he could only control the divine flame of order, but he could not retract it. Every bit of it was wasted, and if he wanted to grow it back to its original size, he would have to spend a lot of hard work. Furiously, Wu Qi turned around and gave the 7 heaven immortals a glance, then let out a furious cry and thrust his divine will towards the chariot of 8 horses, which had transformed into a 7-colored cloud tattoo and was hidden on his wrist. Run, run quickly. I need to use the chariot of 8 horses' extraordinary ability to flee. As his divine will pierced into the 7-colored cloud, and as Wu Qi was about to unleash the chariot of 8 horses, a subtle message was suddenly sent out from the chariot. Perhaps it was because he had been using the chariot to flee for his life for the past few days, the connection between Wu Qi and the chariot had become even closer. As a result, another magical ability of the chariot had automatically appeared in Wu Qi's spiritual ocean. After a brief moment of pondering, Wu Qi let out a long cry. Suddenly, a faint cloud burst out from beneath his feet, while the cloth on his back was blasted apart by a 7-colored ray. Then, the image of a handsome horse appeared on Wu Qi's back. The horse had a pair of wings on its back, and its body was shrouded in clouds and mist. Like a living creature, it was galloping on Wu Qi's back, while a vast and irresistible heat flow rushed into Wu Qi's body in an instant. Wu Qi let out a very strange neigh. Suddenly, a pair of vague, fleshy wings spread out from his back, while a strange light fused with the dark beam transformed from his acquired magnetic sword beam. He cried out in surprise, and in just a blink of an eye, the dark beam expanded to a length of several miles and a width of several tens of feet. Amidst a strange buzzing noise, it sped up into the sky, coiling up Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu, and sped off into the distance. A ripping noise rang out, as a clear cloud path was torn open in the void. Before the 7 heaven immortals could catch up with him, Wu Qi had already vanished without a trace. This was another extraordinary ability of the chariot of 8 horses. If the owner did not want to summon the entire chariot to attract too much attention, he could also summon the 8 true spirits of the Pegasi, allowing them to possess Wu Qi's body and borrow their divine power to increase the speed of Wu Qi's escape beam. With Wu Qi's current cultivation base, he could barely control 1% of the true spirit power of one of the Pegasi. Just this 1% of the true spirit power could increase the speed of Wu Qi's acquired magnetic sword beam by 10 times, almost reaching the speed of teleportation of an ordinary cultivator. A dark beam flashed, and in just a blink of an eye, Wu Qi had brought Xiong Wanling and the others to a distance of over 10,000 miles away. In just a blink of an eye, the vast energy in his body was completely drained. With a muffled groan, Wu Qi fell from the sky. Without saying a word, he swallowed a spirit pill that could help him recover his energy. After regaining a little bit of his strength, Wu Qi brought Xiong Wanling and the others into the thick Xian Bing layer. They went through the 100 miles thick Xian Bing layer, and plunged into the deep ocean of Shui Yuan planet, which was pitch black and had never seen the sunlight since ancient times. Xiong Wanling and He Qianqiu unleashed their defensive light, protecting Wu Qi, Yan Qijuan, and Zhao Kuo. The group of 5 went straight to the bottom of the ocean, and found a dense coral reef. Then, they hid in a water cave underneath the reef. Only at that moment did Wu Qi cough out a few mouthfuls of blood, falling down and sitting in the water cave in a sorry state. Without saying a word, he cast out several hundred primordial runes, completely concealing all auras around the water cave and sealing off all the auras in the surroundings. At that moment, Wu Qi finally breathed out a sigh of relief, shaking his head with a bitter smile on his face. With all the chariot of 8 horses, he was able to fly with ease and no trace. However, summoning the true spirit of a Pegasus to possess him and increase his flying speed was something that could cost him his life. Just now, when the Pegasus moved, the speed of the escape beam skyrocketed. At that moment, Wu Qi had a feeling that all the cells in his body were being squeezed by a juicer, and that his last bit of strength was almost drained. The speed of the flying was indeed extremely fast. The dark beam transformed by the escape beam could be compared to the teleportation of an ordinary nascent divinity cultivator. In just a short amount of time, they had already traveled 10,000 miles away. However, it was a little too exhausting. Even with the vast innate energies stored in all 10 of Wu Qi's innate Jin Dan, all of them were consumed in just a blink of an eye. An ordinary man could never withstand the extraordinary ability of the chariot of 8 horses. However, as a precious treasure like the chariot of 8 horses was too eye-catching, if it was not necessary, it would be better not to reveal it in front of others. Laughing bitterly, Wu Qi took out a few spirit pills that could replenish energy and heal wounds and consumed them. Only then did he nod his head at Yan Qijuan, who had a worried look on his face, and said with a smile, "All right, now that we're here, even a heaven immortal will not be able to find us." Imperial advisor He Qianqiu nodded his head. Flicking his sleeve, he threw Yan Xiaoqi, Ma He, and the other 2 men and 3 women out from the chariot. Upon being thrown out from the chariot, Yan Xiaoqi and her companions, whose energies were sealed by He Qianqiu with a restrictive spell, immediately cried out in alarm. They gave Wu Qi and his companions a fearful look, then opened their mouths and bit down forcefully. Wu Qi snorted coldly. A dark beam flashed on his right index finger, and a primordial rune that could paralyze one's movement flickered. Immediately, the bodies of all 6 men turned stiff, and could no longer move. Opening Yan Xiaoqi's mouth, Wu Qi fumbled with her teeth for a while, then suddenly pulled out one of her teeth. Casually, he crushed the tooth, and a drop of sticky liquid that came with a strong, sweet aroma slowly dripped down. The liquid fell onto the hard coral reef. Amidst a sizzling noise, a hole the size of a human head was corroded into the coral reef. Shaking his head, Wu Qi sneered and said, "Trying to commit suicide by consuming poison? Damn it! Even if your fleshly bodies are dead, your souls will still have to confess obediently. Imperial advisors, do you have a method to imprison souls and interrogate them?" Xiong Wanling shook his head and said, "Lao Tzu only knows how to kill and eat people, he doesn't know that kind of method." He Qianqiu grinned coldly and said, "Interrogate souls, I do have a method. I can't guarantee that I can squeeze out everything from their souls, but I can always get 70 to 80% of the truth from them." Wu Qi smiled at Yan Xiaoqi and said, "Did you hear that? Look, why don't you tell us everything? It will save us a lot of effort, don't you think?" Faintly, Wu Qi snorted coldly and said, "You've done a good job this time. Murdering the Crown Prince of Great Yen is a crime that will get you all your clan members executed. You've even made me come all the way here from White Cloud Planet, being hunted and beaten all the way. Damn it, you've even killed 3 heaven immortals." Pointing at his left shoulder, which was slowly growing back, Wu Qi sneered and said, "Hurry up and confess, and I'll spare you a broken soul for reincarnation." Yan Xiaoqi closed her eyes, while Ma He and the others snorted coldly as well. Wu Qi was taken aback. He gave Ma He's face a look, then suddenly cried out in surprise. He walked to Ma He's side, grabbed Ma He, and tore off Ma He's pants with one claw, tearing off his underwear in 2 or 3 moves. Yan Qijuan gasped abruptly, then cried out sternly, "Ma He, who cleansed your body when you entered the palace?" Between Ma He's legs was shockingly a lump of cumbersome matter. It was completely intact, and clearly belonged to a proper man. Chapter 340. Wu Qi knitted his brows into a tight frown. What was the difference between Ma He's performance and that of a death warrior? After a brief moment of silence, Wu Qi said carefully, "Don't make too much noise. There are 7 heaven immortals, and 1 heaven immortal's nascent divinity whose fleshly body was destroyed. TSK, the void around Shui Yuan planet is sealed off by them as well. Even the Grand Universal Teleportation Formation cannot enter or leave the planet. If we flee with the planetary ship, we won't be able to escape from the joint attack of 7 heaven immortals." Ma He laughed strangely, clutching his lower abdomen with both hands. While coughing out blood, he stared at Yan Qijuan and said, "Crown Prince, no matter how you torture us, we will never tell you who our master is. Even if we have to torture our souls, we firmly believe that we will never let you know anything meaningful." Zhao Kuo pondered for a while, then nodded and said, "Although Lao Ai is an unbearable man, he is not that stupid. Even if he were to arrange some manpower, he would never use his own disciples. The flaws of these few people are too obvious. A eunuch who was reborn from Duanyang, a female official who lost her virginity a few years ago. Anyone would be able to link it to Lao Ai." Yan Qijuan and Zhao Kuo's Chi frowned. Slowly, Wu Qi pulled out a small dagger and said in a deep voice, "Who said there is no way to investigate? There is a method in this world called torture." No matter how hard Wu Qi tried to persuade them, Yan Xiaoqi and Ma He refused to say a word. Flustered and exasperated, Yan Qijuan sprung to his feet and gave Ma He a hard kick on his lower abdomen. He had used too much strength in the kick. Ma He howled miserably as his body bounced up and down like a prawn. Blood kept spraying out of his mouth, drenching his entire body. Wu Qi threw away the horses he was carrying in his hand, then said with a cold voice, "That's right. We'll wait for these heaven immortals to get impatient, and we'll wait for them to reveal their flaws. Or, we can still wait for Great Yan's reinforcements. But, it's still fun. Why don't we just extract their souls and interrogate them?" Wu Qi was stunned. Frowning, he stared at Yan Xiaoqi for a long time, then suddenly shook his hand and released Gold Horn and Silver Horn from the spirit breeding ring. Gold Horn and Silver Horn spun quickly in the narrow cave excitedly. Staring at Yan Xiaoqi and the other 5 men and women who were lying on the ground, they shouted, "Does anyone want to eat them?" "Io, there are both men and women. Men are chewy, women are delicate, both are delicious." Yan Qijuan was so angry that he kept stamping his feet. "Lao Ai, a vile man. How dare he, how dare he, how dare he, how dare he bellowed. Wu Qi squatted down and slapped away Gold Horn and Silver Horn's big heads that kept approaching Yan Xiaoqi. He said in a deep voice, "Now I've changed my mind. You're just disciples of Great Sun's sect, but you're not sent here by Lao Ai, are you? Lao Ai is not that stupid. If he asks you to come forward, wouldn't he be confessing without being pressed? As long as the Crown Prince is not killed, it is very likely that we can trace it back to you. And, with the strange behavior on your bodies, it will be very easy to trace it back to Lao Ai." Yan Qijuan's face turned blue with anger. He stared fixedly at Ma He's crotch, his face alternating between blue and purple. As the Crown Prince of Great Yan, how could the chief eunuch in his mansion not cleanse his body? If this was spread out, how many people would laugh at him? There might even be some rumors spreading across Great Yan. If that happened, how could he still have a foothold in the imperial court? Even the bloodline of so many of his children and grandchildren would be questioned by others. Yan Qijuan was taken aback. He frowned and said, "Impossible. These lady officials are the elites trained by Great Yan's imperial palace, and will be assigned to the imperial clan in the future. They grew up in the imperial palace since they were young. How could they possibly do something like this?" Wu Qi did not finish his words. A girl in love in the imperial palace. Given Swan Ni's methods, it was too easy for him to control such a girl. It was very likely that Yan Xiaoqi was subdued by Lao Ai himself. The imperial palace, where these lady officials were secretly trained, was not heavily guarded. With Lao Ai's overall strength, it was not difficult for him to sneak in and out of it. Wu Qi took a deep breath and said in a low voice, "All right, they are gone." A white light flashed from the spirit breeding ring, amidst which came tens of tall and burly longbow men. Immediately, the narrow cave was filled with them. Upon hearing Wu Qi's words, Yan Xiaoqi suddenly said in a cold voice, "Now that you know it's our sect leader who asked us to do this, do you still have the courage to kill us?" Yan Qijuan was taken aback. Wu Qi gave him a look and shook his head. Yan Qijuan cried out sternly, "Their souls are also sealed with restrictive spells. Once their souls are interrogated with a soul-searching technique, their souls will vanish immediately." Everyone shut their mouths, and no one made a sound. Zhao Kuo's face was deathly pale. He sat cross-legged on the ground, his eyes rolled as he stared at the top of the cave, his lips twitching. Slowly, He Qianqiu and Xiong Wanling rose to their feet, assuming a posture of fighting for their lives. If Wu Qi's talismans were broken, their whereabouts would be exposed. Under the pursuit of 7 heaven immortals, how could Wu Qi and his companions have the chance to survive? Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh, shook his head and said, "It's true. Interrogating a living soul can easily vanish your 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls. Once your souls vanish, you won't be able to reincarnate even if you want to." "I'm not a cruel man. It's better for all of us if you tell us what you want. What do you think?" Zhao Kuo glared at Yan Qijuan, pointed his finger at Ma He, grinned coldly and said, "Even the eunuchs of great Yan dynasty have such things. Why can't the lady officials secretly trained in the imperial palace be raped by someone?" I've learned something new today. Great Yan dynasty has all kinds of strange and bizarre things. Although it was convenient to obtain a confession by interrogating a soul with a mystic technique, generally speaking, the information obtained by squeezing a soul would be incomplete. If the target also had some restrictive spells in their soul, it was more likely that they would not be able to obtain any useful information. Judging from Ma He's behavior, it seemed that he had really thrown all caution to the wind. Furthermore, the noble and solemn smile he wore just now, which made Wu Qi feel that his master behind the scene was not as simple as he looked. With a stern voice, Yan Qijuan snapped, "Why are you still wasting your breath on these traitors? Just extract their souls and interrogate them directly." Meanwhile, Wu Qi stared at Ma He and Yan Xiaoqi with a gloomy face. "Ma He," he said coldly, "I bet you have joined Great Sun's sect for the sake of your broken yang. As for Yan Xiaoqi, you are a girl who grew up in the imperial palace. If there is a man who can." Casually, Wu Qi undid the restrictive spell on Ma He's body. His right palm was now less than an inch away from Ma He's forehead. The tiny ghost faces formed from the dark mist were twisting and jumping on Ma He's face, sending a cold breeze straight into Ma He's brain. Vaguely, when those ghost faces approached, Wu Qi could see a blurry and translucent figure inside Ma He's body, twisting and struggling restlessly. Yet, no matter how hard the figure tried, it just could not escape from the restraint of the body. A large amount of saliva dripped down from the corner of Yan Xiaoqi's mouth, dripping wet all over her body. Fortunately, it was a very energy-consuming task to conduct a carpet search with divine will. A few divine wills hovered around the nearby seabed for less than the time of one breath, then quickly left. Gradually, the runes on the rock wall dimmed and disappeared. The surrounding natural energies were slowly being injected into the runes, restoring their power. Pointing his finger at Yan Xiaoqi and the other 2 girls, Wu Qi said in a cold voice, "Rape them, torture them, use the cruelest methods to deal with them. I don't care about anything else, I just want their confessions." Wu Qi pressed his palm down, but Ma He smiled proudly. Wearing a sacred, solemn, and even somewhat solemn smile, he slowly closed his eyes and said, "Torture our souls? No matter how you torture us, we will never yield." Yan Qijuan and Wu Qi were stunned at the same time, then both of them cried out at the same time, "Damn it, Lao Ai." Ma He clenched his teeth tightly, staring coldly at Wu Qi. With a wave of his right hand, Wuqi gradually exercised a very cruel mystic art of extracting the souls of living beings from the technique of ghost and god taught by Princess Xianglu. Gradually, the flesh on the fingers of his right hand shriveled and turned transparent, exposing 5 pale finger bones. All of a sudden, Wuqi's finger bones turned pitch black. Vaguely, a dark mist seeped out from his fingertips, transforming into dozens of tiny, ferocious ghost faces, leaping and bouncing in his palm. A series of bone-cracking noises came from Mahi's body, as he was kicked against the rock wall. Pop! Many parts of his skin and flesh exploded, splashing and splashing all over the rock wall. After pondering for a brief moment, Wuqi stopped the soul-extracting mystic art. Without saying a word, he pulled out the poisonous fangs from the mouths of the other 4 girls, then removed the restrictive spells on them one by one. He shouted in a deep voice, "I'll give you a chance. Tell me who ordered you to do this. I'll leave you with a broken soul for reincarnation. Otherwise, don't blame me for being ruthless." While speaking, Wuqi smiled bitterly and said, "Eunuchs can be reborn after their yang is cut off, and palace maids and female officials can be subdued by him with a romantic approach. I wonder how many eunuchs, palace maids, and female officials are living in the mansions of all the princes and imperial clan members of Great Yan Dynasty. How many disciples does Lao Ai have in Great Yan Dynasty?" Shaking his head helplessly, Wuqi turned to Zhao Kuo and told him something. Zhao Kuo was taken aback. He cursed under his breath, rose to his feet with a frown, and walked next to Yan Xiaoqi. Very quickly, he took off Yan Xiaoqi's undergarments, bowed his head, and fiddled with them. After that, he raised his head, snorted coldly and said, She is indeed no longer a virgin. Elder brother, according to my experience of over 2,000 years of visiting the brothels, this girl has lost her virginity at least a few years ago." Streams of powerful divine will were sweeping across the bottom of the ocean, frantically scanning the surroundings. When the divine will swept across the underwater cave under the coral reef where Wuqi was, the primordial runes Wuqi had constructed had automatically blocked the detection of the divine will. However, the powerful impact of the divine will had made these runes tremble and nearly explode. The gap between Wuqi's cultivation base and that of a heaven immortal was simply too huge. While Yan Qijuan was roaring furiously, leaping forward and slapping his horse several dozens of times in a row, trying to force Wuqi to tell him the truth, all of a sudden, the primordial runes Wuqi had just planted on the rock walls around the cave burst with tiny beams at the same time. Amidst a series of crackling noises, these runes began to leave traces on the dark rock walls. Tiny electric arcs burst out from the runes, brightly illuminating the dark cave. Xiong Wanling asked with a blank expression, "Does that mean we can only assume that Lao Ai is the one who did this? There is no way we can investigate further." Wuqi sneered and said, "Also, once they are captured, they will immediately commit suicide by consuming poison, leaving only their corpses behind." Shaking his head, Wuqi took out the sword of greedy wolf and began cutting the rock walls, expanding the cave. Yan Qijuan's face turned green. He was so angry that his body was shivering. Suddenly, he roared furiously and rushed forward, giving Mahi a powerful kick. Slowly, Wuqi brought his palm close to Mahi's forehead, reached into his mouth, and pulled out the poisonous fang. "Interrogating a living soul," said Wuqi in a deep voice, "interrogating a living soul could very well shatter the soul. It might not be able to reveal the secret we want in your mind. Therefore, in order to avoid suffering, you better tell us yourself, who asked you to murder the crown prince?" "Then, we can only wait," said Zhao Kuo with a deep voice. Chapter 341. Then, Wuqi carved out a few spacious cave abodes on the walls of the cave. In the original cave, a dozen longbow men were working hard to torture Yan Xiaoqi and the other 2 girls, following the order of the great divine Magus. The physiological quality of longbow men was different from that of ordinary human beings. Their bodies were extremely strong, and they could last for a long time. Yan Xiaoqi and the other two girls were violated by them in turns, and their miserable cries made Yan Qijuan feel bad. Surprisingly, Zhao Kuo was standing aside and enjoying the scene calmly. With a smile on his face, he tried to persuade Yan Xiaoqi, who was screaming in a hoarse voice, "Tell us everything, and you won't have to suffer like this. Tell us the person who ordered you to do this. Do you really want to be humiliated first, then have your souls extracted and tortured, and finally have your souls destroyed?" Zhao Kuo breathed out a long sigh and said, "No one is worth your sacrifice, and no one is worth your sacrifice. Tell us the truth, and you will be free. Why are you so persistent? Why are you so protective of that person? You are not worth it." Yan Xiaoqi and the other two girls widened their eyes and stared straight at Zhao Kuo. On Yan Xiaoqi's face, there was once again the sacred smile of a martyr. Gnashing her teeth, she sneered at Zhao Kuo and said, "What do you know?" 5 simple words were filled with disdain and mockery. It was as if she had come to a realization that the world was filled with turbid waves, and she was the only one who could control the clear stream. An air of loftiness and arrogance emanated from her, made Zhao Kuo speechless for a long time. Laughing bitterly, Zhao Kuo no longer paid any attention to the 3 girls, who were wailing and howling in pain. Fiddling with the little dagger in his hand, he smilingly came next to Ma He, who was lying on the ground, unable to move. "Brother, please confess obediently. Otherwise, I will use this dagger to slowly slice you piece by piece in a moment." Why don't I help you clean yourself up once? This time, I'm going to slice you piece by piece. It will be very, very, very painful for you. Lightly patting on Jin Jiao, who came to him while drooling, Zhao Kuo slowly slid the dagger across Ma He's body. Ma He looked at Zhao Kuo calmly, with a faint smile on his face. Even when the dagger cut through his body and cut off his limbs, which were greedily devoured by Gold Horn and Silver Horn, causing him to convulse in pain and break out in cold sweat, he still wore a faint smile and looked at Ma He with a mocking and disdainful expression. He was like a noble swan flying in the clouds, looking down at an unbearable toad. Ma He's gaze irritated Zhao Kuo, which made him even more ruthless and cruel. Blood and sweat flowed all over the ground, accompanied by the screams of Yan Xiaoqi and the other 2 girls. The small cave was like hell. Yan Qijuan stood aside with his hands clasped behind his back, grimacing in pain as he stared at Ma He and Yan Xiaoqi, who were plunged into a hell of torture. His face alternated between pale and green. After a long time, he coldly berated, "If you still don't confess, do you really want to suffer the pain of having your souls extracted and refined?" With great difficulty, Ma He and Yan Xiaoqi turned their heads and gave Yan Qijuan a cold glance. Suddenly, they laughed coldly together. The interior of the cave was badly mutilated. Wu Qi found a small cave abode which he had just opened up, using primordial runes to seal off all the auras and noises in the surroundings. After that, he carefully let immortal Chang Wu out. Tied up like a rice dumpling by the spirit-restricting rope, immortal Chang Wu had his eyes wide open. As his nascent divinity was completely sealed off by the rope, he had lost the ability to think. Although his eyes were open, he turned a blind eye to everything around him, completely cutting off all contact with the outside world. Sitting cross-legged next to immortal Chang Wu, Wu Qi sighed and said, "You can't blame me. It was your woman who came to us first. You killed someone for taking upper-grade energy stones. Why are you heaven immortals so immoral? You can't even teach your own woman well. How could you do such a despicable thing by taking money to kill someone?" Patting immortal Chang Wu's face, Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh and said, "And the result? You've harmed others and yourself. We've suffered a great loss, and you've even fallen into my hands. Why did you do that? Why did you do that? If you could educate your woman to be a good person, who has 5 virtues, 4 beauties, and 3 passions, you wouldn't be in this mess today, right? As a heaven immortal, you've fallen into my hands. Don't you feel aggrieved?" In a head-on battle, a heaven immortal could easily kill 1,000 Wu Qis with a slap. But Before immortal Chang Wu could react, he was knocked down to the ground by Wu Qi using the drunken dragon incense. As a heaven immortal, he had fallen into such an aggrieved state. If immortal Chang Wu could hear Wu Qi's words, think, and react, perhaps he would have long coughed out a mouthful of blood and died of anger because of Wu Qi. After sizing up immortal Chang Wu for a while, Wu Qi casually ripped off all his clothes. With both hands moving like a whirlwind, Wu Qi walked around immortal Chang Wu's body for a while, then performed several dozens of secret incantation gestures found in Scroll of Stealing. Immediately, several thousand bright beams were injected into immortal Chang Wu's body, and several thousand silver specks were seen swimming on his skin. Wisps of natural energies kept injecting into these specks, making them look brighter and brighter. Gradually, they condensed into runes that looked like they were forged from pure silver. Wu Qi's divine will followed these runes and formed a strange force, then slowly seeped into immortal Chang Wu's body. With a gentle pull, he pulled out a clump of golden liquid that was about the size of a human head, translucent like a crystal. Several hundred tiny golden runes could be vaguely seen in the liquid, while a vast amount of immortal energy kept rushing out from it. Hastily, Wu Qi used some restrictive spells to seal off the immortal energy. After giving the golden liquid a careful look, Wu Qi could not help but smile. No wonder when immortal Chang Wu was captured alive by Wu Qi after he fell into a coma, his prime immortal item did not react at all. Apparently, as immortal Chang Wu was used to close combat, he had devoured the item spirit in this immortal item with his own nascent divinity, replacing it and becoming the item spirit of this golden immortal armor. With that, immortal Chang Wu could control the immortal armor with ease, and it could provide him with a better help in close combat. But, the flaw was that after he was knocked down by the drunken dragon incense, his immortal armor did not react at all. With a faint smile on his face, Wu Qi threw the immortal armor, which was not controlled by the item spirit, onto the earth element dragon scale shield. Immediately, a large sheet of yellow dust rushed out from the shield and smashed onto the golden liquid like countless shooting stars. Slowly, they shattered the golden liquid and broke it down into tiny golden particles, which were slowly absorbed and digested by the dragon scale shield. After absorbing a part of the immortal armor's energy essence, the earth element dragon scale shield did not have any change. The golden liquid turned into a clump of half-solid golden metal, about the size of a human head. The immortal armor was forged with several dozens of rare and precious metals, which gave it a very strong defensive strength and offensive strength. As for the metal pieces that the earth element dragon scale shield could not absorb, Wu Qi pondered for a while, then with a sway of his body, 18 celestial fiend puppets walked out of his body. He threw the remaining parts of the immortal armor to the puppets. Immediately, the puppets swarmed over, spewing green smoke and poisonous flame from their mouths, corroding the immortal armor into tiny metal powder and swallowing it. Abruptly, a strong beam of light burst out from all the puppets' mouths. After fusing with the immortal armor's materials, their bodies had become a few notches stronger. That was how these celestial fiend puppets worked. By feeding them with a large amount of rare and precious materials, they could be stimulated to evolve continuously. Theoretically, they could evolve without any limit, if Wu Qi had such a huge property for them to waste. After solving the immortal armor inside immortal Chang Wu's body, Wu Qi produced the Phoenix Fire Pouch, placed immortal Chang Wu's body on top of the divine flame of order, and began to carefully burn him. As the divine flame of order seeped into immortal Chang Wu's body bit by bit, large golden crystals kept dripping out from his body, falling all over the ground like precious pearls with tinkling and clanking sounds. These crystals were the essence of immortal Chang Wu's flesh, blood, and energy essence. They were as hard as diamonds, and each of them contained an enormous amount of energy essence and blood essence. After being burned by the divine flame of order for nearly an hour, immortal Chang Wu, a 36th tier heaven immortal, was left with only 360 fist-sized golden crystals. Wu Qi kept all these crystals into the black dragon spirit ring, and threw one into the divine flame of order. Suddenly, the purple-green divine flame grew stronger and stronger, growing from the size of a strand of hair to the thickness of a water bucket, nearly 10 feet tall. The Phoenix Fire Pouch shook, and the enlarged divine flame of order compressed abruptly, quickly transforming into a nearly solid ball of purple-green flame, about the size of a soybean, hovering above the phoenix fire pouch. This little flame looked inconspicuous, but the power it contained was more than 100 times greater than that of the huge divine flame just now. The blood crystals of immortals can nourish the divine flame of order. Not bad, not bad. Wu Qi grinned coldly. Immortal Chang Wu's immortal soul was left hovering in midair, glinting with a golden light like a living person. It was tightly bound by the spirit-restricting rope. The immortal soul looked like a living person, and at its core was a clump of complicated silver-white runes. These runes were swimming in immortal Chang Wu's soul like fishes. Occasionally, a few of them would collide with each other, producing a melodious sound of metal clashing. These runes were known as heavenly Tao epigraphs. They were the specific manifestations of the profound principles of heaven and earth that immortals had comprehended from the great Tao of heaven and earth. As immortal Chang Wu was cultivating with a pure gold element body cultivation technique, these heavenly Tao epigraphs were as sharp as blades. When Wu Qi scanned them with his divine will, he felt as if he was being hacked by a sharp blade, and felt a severe pain in his nascent divinity. The so-called scroll of stealing, the technique used to steal from the heaven, is. Wu Qi smiled faintly. His eyes went wide as he carefully performed incantation gestures with both hands. Countless incantation gestures were cast out gracefully, transforming into a large silver net that slowly seeped into the defenseless immortal Chang Wu's immortal soul. Like catching a fish in a large net, all 108 silver heavenly Tao epigraphs in immortal Chang Wu's immortal soul were captured by the net, then slowly compressed into a silver light ball the size of a sesame seed. With a gentle pull, all of immortal Chang Wu's enlightenment of the heavenly Tao were extracted from his immortal soul by Wu Qi. At this moment, even though immortal Chang Wu had released his immortal soul, he had forgotten all his enlightenment of the heavenly Tao. Even though he possessed the divine will and dharmic power of a heaven immortal, he still could not use any dharma spells or divine abilities. This was because he had forgotten all his enlightenment of the Tao, magic and divine abilities. Wu Qi breathed out a faint sigh, then swallowed the tiny silver light ball, quickly controlling it to rush into his dantian. The Jin Dan in Wu Qi's dantian was throbbing, as it quickly fused with all of immortal Chang Wu's enlightenment of the heavenly Tao. An enormous spirit pressure rushed out from Wu Qi's dantian, as his Jin Dan underwent a tremendous transformation. Hastily, Wu Qi fished out several hundreds of thousands of energy stones and placed them around him. An enormous amount of natural energy kept rushing into his body from these energy stones. Silently, Wu Qi exercised White Cloud Immortal Sex Energy Unity Mystic Technique, causing the energies in his main meridians to surge and surge. All of a sudden, a blinding light burst out from the Jin Dan in his dantian. A nascent soul with a silver body sprung out from the disintegrating Jin Dan that Wu Qi suddenly had. The nascent soul had a dull expression, and its eyes were lifeless. It looked like an ignorant puppet. With a thought, Wu Qi separated a thread of divine will from his nascent divinity and injected it into the empty shell of the nascent soul. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.